are represented. The juries are not present. This matter is here today for discussion and resolution of any matters that must precede the testimony of Dr. Oziel, who is the next witness. And we did have a brief discussion yesterday afternoon on that subject. And the court directed counsel to meet and confer in regards to the scope of the prosecution's examination of Dr. Oziel. I assume that that meeting has occurred and that has assisted in counsel focusing on those issues that they feel have to be resolved before Dr. Oziel testifies.
I have met with Mr. Carrion and conferred, but before we get to anything, we have some idea of a position that addresses the immediate privilege problem. But what I did last night is I went through the 402 rulings on adopted admissions and 11-1-352. And I prepared as good a matrix of the rulings as I could at 1 o'clock in the morning. And I've given it to the people, and we have an area that we are unclear on. What I'd like to do is give the court a copy. Again, I tried my best, but it was late. And the portion that I think Mrs. Kazan should inquire a little vague on. Oh, I know what happened. If I don't have, you know what, we never got back to that as a privilege rule, I thought. I'm not sure. The part that we're vague on appears on page 9. Beginning with.
Well, hold on, let me see if I have that document here.
Okay. Kim, where on the transcript is it talking about page 9? What page?
Well, we don't have it down, but it would be about 85-75.
This was the statement that we had used as the basis of the hearing. You're referring to, is that right?
Yes, Your Honor, the marked copy.
Yeah.
And I mean, mine was so marked up, I decided to do that little schedule.
I don't seem to have it in my folder here.
Oh, I see.
It had been given to the clerk to be marked as an exhibit, but I think you give it back to me, that the statement of Oziel will be used.
And then we move on.
Well, but you got it.
I know, it seemed to be.
Okay, I do have it. Sorry.
Very confusing. That was really confusing.
Okay, and what page were you referring to?
Page 9, Your Honor, in the first paragraph, there should be a bracket, and
Yes.
it really applies to the sentence that begins, "I then informed him." Notes that you kept all along in relation to sessions, and our objection was that referred to privileged prior sessions. And I thought the court had ruled, but did you find another reference?
No, I don't think that was ever.
I don't know if you have ruled, the bracket should actually go to, he said he segregated the files, safe deposit boxes, blah, blah, blah. Up until, I don't know where you break it rationally.
All right, what's the question?
All right, what's the question is, we're objecting to this coming in because it refers to privileged information. I mean, we've gone as far, I guess, for example, what Mr. Carrion and I conferred about earlier was that he wanted to elicit from Dr. Oziel that Erik was referred to him with respect to an incident in Calabasas, and that referral occurred in 1988. And he saw him after that. And my position on that was I would not object to that bare bones information being elicited so long as it was understood and agreed by Mr. Kuriyama that he did not, and we did not consider that a waiver of privilege, given the court's previous ruling concerning Eric's statement September 17th to Detective Zola. So that far we've gone, but we haven't gone anywhere with notes of prior sessions, and I do not intend to open up notes of prior sessions.
And your belief is that this is a reference to sessions that had occurred prior to October 31st.
Yes, Your Honor, I mean, it couldn't refer to the notes of October 31st, since we were deep in the heart of October 31st.
Is this October 31st or November the 2nd on page 9?
This is November 2nd, but he hasn't mentioned notes before then. It's right at the beginning of November 2nd. He says he informed the notes have been kept all along in relation to the sessions with both Erik and himself. And in addition, notes have been kept of the sessions that I had had with his parents.
All right, well, that clearly refers to something before, but the fact that notes have been kept of the November or the October 31st session could also be included in that statement.
Well, I think we should ask him if that's what he meant, rather than just make stuff up.
Well, no one is trying to make anything up. I'm just
No, I
saying
mean,
they could be
sometimes we try-
included within everything that in addition to whatever notes I kept for October 31st, there were other notes. So it's inclusive of October 31st, but goes beyond it. Let me read the rest of it,
Sure.
since it does relate to the parents and things.
Well, it relates at that point to files.
Yeah. All right, number one, is it the people's intent to offer this?
Yes, Your Honor, what we wanted, the gravamen of this is that he told them that he had files on them and that he kept them in a safety deposit box and had given the keys of the safety deposit box to several attorneys with the instruction that if something happened to him, that these files should be open, or the safety deposit boxes should be open. So that is the purpose for offering this, not to try to implicate that they had been there before, but rather that he told them.
Well, the trouble with that is that aside from any claim of privilege, the inference is that there must have been something in those notes or records that related to the defendant's intent to kill their parents and kill Dr. Oziel. And that's why he gave them or made them available to others to retrieve if he was killed. And the jury would logically conclude that that's what was in that material. And then you're really getting into the content of other sessions, and whether that information is true or not is certainly not before this jury at this point.
But Your Honor, this was on November the 2nd, and he was threatened on the 31st, and on November the 2nd, he tells them about this procedure that he's using to protect himself.
I understand that, but then he's talking about all these files that he's given to the lawyers or made available to lawyers or others if he suffered harm. And those files and records would only be usable or make any sense if Oziel had suffered harm, if they pointed the finger at someone who had committed crimes and would have been likely the person who committed the crime or endangered him. So you're causing everyone to speculate that in all of these earlier files, there was information dealing with just that.
Well, we weren't proposing to put on that there were lots of other files, merely that he had kept notes of the session. And the jury can infer from that it's a session before, because it seems to me that it was the October 31st session, not anything before, that prompted him to make this segregation and this deposit in the safety deposit box.
Well, but if he then segregated his notes from October 31st, then clearly there wouldn't be that basis of speculation, and I don't think the defense would have their objections, but they're concerned about the reference to all these other files and what might or might not have been in them.
But we're not offering the reference to all the other files. What we would propose to do is tailor it. That he indicated that he kept the notes and that he kept the notes on them in the safety deposit box. And at that point, there's not going to be evidence that they've ever seen him before.
Well, let me just say two things. Number one, it has to be better than notes of the them. I mean, if this is what Dr. Oziel
Well,
meant.
let's stop and ask this question. Since he dictated notes sometime after these sessions occurred, did he also keep written notes of the October 31st session?
No,
No, Your Honor, but let
So
me-
then he would not have been truthful if he told them that he had put those notes in a
he
file.
wasn't, but he wasn't truthful about, oh, he's admitted that.
Your Honor, in the transcripts which we got on Sunday regarding the in-camera hearings, he
Yeah.
testified that this was a lie, that he hadn't made these provisions yet. And that he told that to them in order to protect himself. So it's not that we're saying,
Could I ask us to please excuse the witness while we're having this discussion?
He's already heard the bulk of it. I don't think it matters.
Well, there's something I want to bring up that I would rather he not, if I might ask, to be excluded.
All right, Dr. Oziel, why don't you just wait outside for a moment while you come right in?
I just want to throw another monkey wrench into this discussion, just to further confuse things. Council now has read the in-camera testimony, and in fact,
This is the in-camera testimony of Dr. Oziel in 1990.
that's correct, June 15th, June 27th, June 28th, and July 30th. And I believe it is in the, both the June 15th and the June 28th transcripts that he testifies that even though this tape, these notes don't contain the information, don't smile just because someone else was talking and it annoyed
Now,
you. I know what
Mr.
you're
Burt was
thinking.
smiling too.
I know what you're thinking.
Everybody at the table was smiling.
I know. It's one of your favorite themes to harass me. You got it. Anyway, just to save time. He testified at those hearings, Your Honor, that he gave this same information, this same warning. I have all your files. In fact, he testified, I have them on tape and I've put them in a safe deposit box. He claims he told that to them on October 31st, not just on November 2nd, even though they're not in the notes. Now, clearly, that has to refer to prior October 31st material.
Your Honor, we're not offering that information. What we're offering is that on November the 2nd, he informed them of the existence of the safety deposit box and instructions to his attorneys regarding information he had on them. I think the jury can clearly infer it was from the threats and the information received on the 31st. We wouldn't offer the statement that's in the middle. It starts out, I then informed him notes had been kept all along in relation to the sessions with both Erik and himself. In addition, notes had been kept of the sessions that I had had with his parents, who were not patients, but were consultants to each of them.
The problem with, I'm sorry.
Well, so it would be our proposal to edit it to delete the unfavorable references of which the defense complains, but I don't see how we should be precluded from indicating that this is part of Dr. Oziel's fear, and this is what he did, this is what he told them, and ultimately, the tapes were found in a safety deposit box.
All right, there is an ingrained feeling that statements shouldn't be edited or altered, that whatever was said should come out, and if it's too prejudicial, then it should be deleted, rather than changing the words and changing the thoughts that were expressed. But sometimes there is a need to do this sort of editing, even though it's something that all of us feel uncomfortable doing. And the people have a viable interest and theory as to why the statement was made to the defendants. The defense has a legitimate concern that the entirety of it brings out privileged material and material that would cause the jurors to speculate.
I have another concern.
Well, let me finish. So there has to be a way that both sides' interests can be accommodated, and sometimes the only way is to edit. And these are not quotes from Dr. Oziel. These are things that he informed the defendants of, and therefore it can be couched or phrased along the lines that he indicated to them that he had placed the notes regarding the October 31st session in a place where others could have access to it if necessary, if harm fell to him. And that would accomplish the people's goal and still not touch on those areas that are concerned to the defense.
The problem is, it's our contention he's lying about this. Not that he's lying to the defendants, he's lying about ever saying this. And we can prove that, as we did in the in-camera hearing, because of the absurdity of his testimony there, that he made this same statement. I've got not just notes, and I have to bring that out in a sense. He testified there that he told them on October 31st that he had tapes, okay? And that he had put tapes in a safe deposit box. Now, the significance of that, Your Honor, in the chain of his, what we submit as his incredibility, is that he then claims that his reason for alerting Judalon Smith for revealing these confidential communications is because he had told the defendants on October 31st that he had tapes, and they were going to figure out somehow that she was his tape duplicator. And that was his main justification. Now, we have to explore those areas. We have to explore those areas in order to show that he is incredible. And that's the area in which he is most clearly incredible.
Well, you intend to go into that then?
Well, I have to go into it in a way that isn't violative of privilege. So I'm willing to work with this section, okay? If the people are willing to fashion a stipulation or a guidance to the witness that on, if he's going to testify theoretically, in his mind, truthfully, as he did in the in-camera hearing, then I would want the right to elicit with admonition to the witness that he told the brothers on October 31st that he would be putting notes or a tape of that session in a safe deposit box, blah, 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 so that I can show the genesis of his story about why Judalon Smith, who went to the police ultimately and got the defendants arrested, why he told her what they told him.
All right,
So
you're
I think
saying
that's a fair trade.
You're saying that on October 31st, he made basically the same statement to your clients, according to his testimony at the in-camera hearing,
Exactly.
and that you want to have the same edited statement as a basis of cross-examination.
Well, it would have to be slightly different. It would have to be that he was going to put either notes or a tape in a safe deposit box. And then we avoided for both sides the same privilege problem. And we'd be willing to live with that. It's not our concern about that this infuses the threat evidence that we object to this. We recognize that it has relevance vis-a-vis the threat evidence.
What is the people's position?
Well, that sounds fine. So can I just clarify with the court that what we would do is on page 9, the first sentence that begins, Lyle mentioned that he had not considered my possession of notes could be helpful. And then go and put that on to the point where it says period. And then skip down to the skip a sentence and start with the next sentence, edited. And that would say, Dr. Oziel indicated to the defendants that he had placed notes of the October 31st session in the safety deposit box and had given the key to the safety deposit box to several attorneys, and just then track it down to the end where it says, since I perceived Lyle as being threatening during the preceding session.
I think it might be simpler, if I might, just so that we can keep him tracked, is take out that sentence, I then informed, go to the period, and then with the next sentence say, let him testify, I stated that I had placed notes of the boys from the previous session and had left those notes in a safe deposit box. And then we've got the same syntax in the same sentence.
All right, as long as it's understood that the defense is not going to cross-examine Dr. Oziel on the fact that not only was this untrue that he said to the defendants, and he admits that it was untrue since he had not done that at that point, but you're not going to go beyond that and say that there was no basis for you even to make such a statement, since there were no notes and no notes, because his statement goes beyond that in that there were files and other things he could have put in
We
there.
could pattern it though and say, because it is true, there were no notes at that point of the October 31st session, and he was saying this as a security device. I don't think there's any question that he'll admit that, and there is no question there were no notes at this point of any kind based on his previous testimony concerning the October 31st session. So, I mean, I don't know that it's worth much to say that he lied to them about this. I mean, I think that's a very minor point, all in all.
Well, he
So-
concedes that was a device he was using to ensure his safety.
I do concede that, so I don't think that's a major issue.
Okay, all right. Has this then been resolved now?
Yes, but I will have to talk to the witness before cross-examination so that I can elicit a carefully redacted version of his having told them the same thing on October 31st.
All right, anything else?
Yes, Your Honor, I just wanted to clear, I want to check, double check something. Could the clerk turn to page 12, please? At the bottom of page 12, there begins the sentence, and each of them independently, and it goes on to page 13. To my recollection, the court struck all of that up to the part where Erik mused they had discussed their concern that their children would kill him. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is that?
Well, let me read it again.
My notes show, Your Honor, that you did under 1101 and 352, and that you went back, you revisited that in transcript volume 58.
Oh, that had been deferred, that's why.
You
And
revisited it the next one.
on page 13, it had been deferred.
Yeah, I think at the very end of that other sentence, the other section. Yes, on page 40, Your Honor, of volume, I have a pre-publication volume with that
Page
transcript.
40?
It was page 40 of volume 58. You went back on line 24 to that document. If you'd like to see this mini transcript. Yeah, I think that you've already said, you said at the bottom of 43, this area again does go into the other crimes, other acts that might cause the jury to speculate that the defendants were planning other crimes, and that is the type of information that is prejudicial. And under 352 of the evidence code, that portion would be excluded as to each defendant, so the court, you did rule.
All right, yeah, that was something that I had deferred, and then after we dealt with something further down, dealing with the same subject matter, we came back to that.
Right.
That was ruling.
That was virtually
Right.
the last one.
Anything else?
Oh, yes, one other
Your Honor,
thing.
Mr. Kuriyama is, okay, his memory is different, that particular, he thinks the sentence, and each of them independently began thinking how important it was for them to commit perfect crimes, period. He was of the impression that everything else about future crimes was what was needed. And I don't think the transcript's all that clear as to exactly the wording.
My note-taking and striking it out was very clear that the import of that entire paragraph was.
Well, you find the language in the transcript of the proceedings. I can't tell you I have a independent recollection of it. I recall being discussed, but I couldn't tell you the specifics of the ruling. That's why we have a transcript. All right, what other matters?
Your Honor, there are some documents that were seized pursuant to the search warrant. One of those documents, which the clerk graciously made a copy of for me yesterday, is the ledger cards of payments billed and payments made by the Menendez family to Dr. Oziel. Although I don't intend to use those cards affirmatively, Dr. Oziel has testified in the past that the ledger cards are a more accurate reflection of actual visits and billing. And with respect to these sessions of what I should say is I don't intend to use them for past therapy, but with respect to these sessions, 1031, 11-2, they are the best record he has previously testified to refresh his recollection about when and how things happen. And therefore, I think it's appropriate that the people be permitted to view those cards to whatever extent that might have some limited privilege. We are willing to waive that limited privilege that they were billed on these dates so that they can have, in advance of cross-examination and for whatever purpose it might be valid for their direct, the same information. I think it's only fair. And so long as it's not deemed a waiver of anything further in the privilege, I have no objection to them having a copy.
This was a ledger for the two unprivileged sessions.
it's a ledger for all the contacts with the Menendez family.
Okay.
So I don't mind them seeing that because that doesn't open up content.
Well, obviously, the fact that someone saw someone professional at a certain date doesn't open the sessions up to disclosure.
Is that a ruling?
Well, anyone knows, the people are not contending that.
Okay.
They're
Well,
not
it's always been
contending
our
that.
position that the mere fact of the visit is not privileged and it's not a confidential communication.
But you're not complaining or contending that the content of the sessions are unprivileged because someone knows that someone went to a therapist on a certain date.
Of course not.
Okay, no one has ever said that. I don't know why you
We're paranoid.
pursued it. Okay,
We haven't had time to see our therapist recently. In any event, I
no
do think.
comment.
No comment, good. There's also contained there seized records from the Oziels concerning the safe deposit box that are not privileged, and that the court's already heard a great deal about that on 1538, and I think those records, I have a copy of them, a copy of that should be made for the people as well. And the other matter that we talked about, which may come up in my cross-examination of Dr. Oziel, has to do with his appointment books. The people have not seen those, and we propose, if it comes up in the cross-examination either today or tomorrow, to point certain things out about those appointment books with Dr. Oziel while never referring to the names of patients. In fact, the names of patients being completely irrelevant to that examination.
Other than your clients.
Even their names are irrelevant for the purpose for which I would like to use the appointment book. So the ledgers are probably more reliable to show my client's visits. The appointment books simply bear on aspects of his practice that we believe are relevant.
Your Honor, I asked Dr. Oziel this morning if he would assert the privileges to his client's names and the other client's names in the appointment book, and he said yes.
Well, we don't dispute that. We're not going to bring out their names.
Well, what I would do is if the appointment books become relevant in this hearing, I would make them available to counsel and to the witness with a protective order that they not be disseminated and that the contents of them and specifically references to any other patients not be disclosed, and that the disclosure to counsel is not deemed a waiver of the privilege of a patient therapist for the other patients. That doesn't mean that the references to the defendants in those ledgers would not, or those calendars would not be available to both sides, but just the references to other patients would still be privileged.
Well, the court should understand that we were shown that we were allowed access to those books by Judge Albrecht, but there was a protective order that we have been under basically ever since. And so we never used the information that we gained for any purpose. We never contacted the patient.
Right. Okay, well, that would, again, be the order that there not be any disclosure of the contents, and the disclosure to counsel for the purpose of this trial is not to be deemed a waiver by any patient. And that's how we would proceed if that arises. Anything else?
Yes, Your Honor. I believe Mr. Kariyama has found reference to the matters we've discussed that start at the bottom of page 12 and goes on to page 13. And then I have a couple other things I want to ask the court just for clarification.
All right.
Page
They're on
7.
page 42 and 43 in the transcript.
Okay, I don't have that, so I can't.
58? Hey, I mean, transcript 58?
Well, I don't have it here.
Well,
This was the July 30th, 1993.
Yeah.
Your Honor, the numbering is not in sequence because it was prepared especially just for this purpose. But
All right, well, I don't think the reporters gave that to me. I think it was given to counsel. I don't recall ever seeing it.
They're at line.
Can I read over your
14,
shoulder, Leslie?
Yes. Line 14, page 42 of that transcript. The court is referring to page 12 of the Dr. Oziel, which is Exhibit 62, Dr. Oziel notes. And Mrs. Bazanich offers to redact or edit the statement to excise future crimes, reference to future crimes. And there's a discussion about that editing. And the court on page 50, or 43 rather, indicates that that portion would be excluded. And the rationale for that is this. Give me one second. The rationale is this, that after the Calabasas burglaries that the defendants participated in, they spoke to Dr. Oziel and indicated that after those burglaries and after their father had criticized them for the burglaries, at that point they started to think about and discussing how important it was for them to commit perfect crimes. Now, it goes on to refer to future crimes that they intend to, or they thought they could commit and never get caught. I think it was that portion of that statement that was to be excised because it talked about future crimes, not about the murders and not about the previous burglaries of Calabasas. So that was my understanding, that at page 43, I think the court, after listening to Mrs. Bozanich, offering to excise the reference to the future crimes and further crimes and not getting caught, that the court said that portion would be excluded as to each defendant. And I believe at the time that the court was referring to the reference to future or further crimes, not to the present murders and not to the burglaries that have occurred.
Well, Your Honor, I think we interpreted it very differently, and particularly since Dr. Oziel testified that they never told him at any time that they were planning to commit other murders or other crimes of any kind. And I thought.
Well, there was another portion of the transcript, as I recall, that dealt with the same sort of discussion.
Right, and basically you also said it's basically already covered in other discussions. I think the bottom of page 11, both defendants agreed that they were involved in this plan and believed it was a perfect murder, which seems to be the point. They want this perfect stuff. So it's already referred to as a perfect crime, not a future crime, a perfect crime. And then the court ruled that that statement of yes, it's down at the bottom of 12 and 13, yeah. It had to do with the notion of perfect crime, and the court said that that's already in. And my notes of when the court ruled here is it all got struck out, which seems to be what the court is doing. Because you said it goes into other crimes, other acts. Even this notion of how important it was to commit perfect crimes is not limited to this crime, nor limited to the Calabasas burglaries, but the court interpreted that as broad enough to make the jury speculate that there were other acts that might cause the jury to speculate that the defendants were planning other crimes, and you excluded it. And the first sentence is just as bad as the rest. Because he says began thinking, actually he testified, began discussing.
All right, there was, my recollection at some point, some colloquy between counsel and the court. And towards the end of that colloquy, Mr. Burt suggested that we make things in the present tense instead of the future tense or past tense. I don't recall if it was in reference to that or something else.
No, it's not here. It was the previous one, and the court ruled that one also was 1101-352 excludable. Because the witness testified that it was not any intention, either present or future, to commit crimes. That, I believe.
Let me ask the bailiffs to see if we have our jurors outside, and if they
They're
are.
going to department.
Sorry?
They're going to department. Oh,
Okay.
So.
All right. Thank you. And we know another jury is coming in.
An hour later.
There was a lot of colloquy about this earlier on in testimony from Dr. Oziel. I didn't think there was any ambiguity in what the court was ruling on here at all. None at all. No, I have it as out and all the reasons.
All right, again, what is it that the people think was not excluded? Just refer me to page 12 or 13 and the lines that you think were not excluded.
The very bottom of page 12, and each of them independently began and thinking about was was stricken and it was replaced with discussing how important it was for them to commit perfect crimes. That was after the Calabasas burglary. Now, the defense had objected to the further crimes and never getting caught and future crimes. And that's what I believe the court had excluded, the reference to future crimes. That is, future from even after the murders occurred. But as far as the statements made by the defendants that they had discussed committing the perfect crime after the Calabasas burglaries goes to the killings, relevant to the killings. Now, anything that occurred after that, what they thought about after they did the murders, that they were going to do further crimes, I would agree that that should be excluded.
Well, but there's no evidence here, either from Dr. Oziel or any other source, that they ever told him that they were contemplating a perfect murder prior to these killings. And if he were asked, I suspect he would repeat the testimony he already gave, that they never indicated at any time, either before the homicides or after, that they intended to commit any future crimes. So what this does is it gives the jury a false notion that they had decided to commit perfect crimes, which he would believe. And second of all, it isn't limited to this crime. It could be all sorts of other crimes. And that's why this aspect, even if it were clear, which it is not at all clear from the way the language reads, that this referred to some period prior in time after the Calabasas burglaries, that's not at all clear from the language. But even if it did, it means they're then putting in bad character evidence that these defendants thought about in a meaningful way, because if it's not meaningful, it's not relevant, committing perfect crimes. So I don't see how that is any less violative of 1101 or any less prejudicial under a 352 matrix than the rest of the sentence.
I think it becomes relevant when the brothers talk about how their father had treated them after the Calabasas burglaries and had made fun of them and told them how stupid they were and then turned them in. Then they indicate that they decided that they would do the perfect crime. And in fact, on page 17, they had told Dr. Oziel that they felt, or it was his impression, based on what they told him, that the father, having talked about how stupid they were for not being able to commit a civil crime like robbery, which is actually a burglary, they felt vindicated that they had in fact committed the perfect crime, that they thought that they would get away with this crime, the killings in this case.
Well, that's coming in, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, Your Honor, that's a very interesting theory. That's Mr. Kuriyama's theory, but he's never had any facts to support that theory. In fact,
Okay, now we're going beyond just the discussion of the words here into argument that we'll have to wait until the close of the trial.
well, exactly. But we shouldn't be allowing evidence in because it supports an argument that Mr. Kuriyama wants to make if it isn't based on fact.
Well, we're just dealing with a legal objection here and trying to verify that this is a matter that's already been ruled upon, and if it has, it has. If it hasn't, then we'll deal with it again.
We were very clear that it was ruled upon. I know there seemed to be a second section. It seemed to me the second came back to this again.
Has the court looked at the transcript of page 43? Is the court's ruling to be clear?
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's why we had the sections bracketed so that we would have something to focus on when we had our discussions. And that was my ruling at the time. And there's no reason at this point, from what's been presented to me, to change that ruling. But that section was ruled on.
So that is omitted.
Yes. All right, anything else now other than the brief hearing with Dr. Oziel in a closed courtroom?
Your Honor, I have some procedural matters.
Yes.
I have made a copy of the statement for Dr. Oziel and delineated where the editing is, what can come in. In fact, I need to edit further the thing we talked about from page 9. But Ms. Abramson indicated she's going to object to Dr. Oziel having the notes.
Well, I don't object to him having them. I object to him reading them to answer questions. I mean, he's a witness whose memory is very significant here. And to the extent that he's able to answer questions from memory, I want him to answer them from memory.
Well, but number one,
We can lead him
what
around.
what happens, and it's very typical in a criminal trial, where there are in limine motions and hearings about all sorts of issues, whether they're privilege or somehow inflammatory or prejudicial information that might be disclosed by a witness. The witness has a dry run, goes through the testimony outside the presence of the jury, and he's cross-examined, and then the witness comes before the jury, and more often than not, the testimony before the jury is much less complete, much less valuable in an objective sense, if one was to look at it and evaluate it based upon the nature of the testimony, how it's presented, than the testimony that occurred prior to the hearing. And the reason for that would be prior to the trial. The testimony in the pretrial hearing was greater benefit for all, because the witness feels so inhibited by all the restraints that are placed upon him when he testifies, that he's told, you can't say this, you can't say that, you can't say this. And there's literally thousands of things that the witness is told the witness can't discuss. And then to go beyond that and say, well, we have a document here that we're all going to be looking at and referring to, and make sure that you don't go beyond that document to tell the jury anything that's not there, is really unfair to the juror, to the witness rather, that he should have that document and he should be able to refer to it. And if it assists him to testify in a way that does not conflict with all of these rulings and admonitions that are given to him, then it's to the benefit of everybody. And as it is, the witness's testimony and his demeanor and everything else is altered by these hearings and rulings, that he is not testifying as a witness would who is not subject to all of these constraints. And we have an artificial situation when a witness comes in under these circumstances. That's just part of the process. But to make it worse by keeping things from him so he would have access to them and he would not be able to refer to them, would just be unfair.
Well, Judge, I didn't suggest that he not have access or not be able to refer. I just don't want him to read it, is all I said. I don't want him to look down and read. He can look down and see what he's allowed to say.
Well, if that assists him so that he doesn't violate any of the rulings, then he's going to be permitted to do that. And I don't think it's fair to complain about it or comment on it in a way that takes advantage of the fact that you've made all these objections to things that he's going to be testifying about or won't be able to testify about, and then object to the fact that he needs to refer to something to verify in his mind that he won't violate any of these rulings. We just had a discussion here about what did I rule last week on one of the issues here, and there was a debate over one's recollection versus another. And without the witness having something before him to document what it is that's been the subject of these rulings, there's no way that he's going to be able to remember all of these things.
But my other point, though, Your Honor, is that he still has to understand the nature of the rulings, because when we question him on cross-examination, he can't wander off into the prohibited areas just because we're asking questions. And the reason I say that is he won't be able to track his answers for cross-examination by referring to that transcript. He must still understand what areas are forbidden, because we're entitled to cross-examine without the witness popping out things that he should be admonished not to discuss, no matter whether the question comes in the form of leading him through his statement or in the form of cross-examination. So that's why my concern is that he not be just relying on that transcript,
Well,
but understand the ruling.
No one said he's going to just rely on that, but if he needs it to assist him, especially in his direct examination, and it would help him in reading it, I think that's fair, and I don't see there's a problem with that. Anything else?
Yes, Your Honor, I just wanted to check with the court, there's two other things. The procedure, we're going to put the statements as to only Erik Menendez on this morning, then we'll have both juries in. Then Ms. Abramson doesn't want to cross-examine on the issues. Well, Ms. Abramson's indicated that some of the cross-examination peculiar to Erik Menendez's statements only she wants to do after both juries but we have to then have Lyle's jury here alone for the things that pertain only to him. So I'm wondering, at what point is it that are we gonna, well, how are we gonna do it? That's
All
what
right,
I'm
well, we'll start with the direct examination of Dr. Oziel relating to Erik Menendez. Specific to Erik Menendez, not peculiar to Erik Menendez, but specific to Erik Menendez. And then the testimony of Dr. Oziel before both juries, direct evidence. And then there are portions of the testimony of Dr. Oziel that will relate only to Lyle Menendez, and we'll take a break at that point, and that will be the subject of examination before Lyle Menendez's jury. Then cross-examination will commence, and whichever side wants to go first, both sides will cover all areas that relate to statements attributed to one or both defendants, either directly or by adoptive admission, and then each defendant will have an opportunity to conduct further cross relating to their client only.
So we're doing all the direct first with the three permutations of the jury.
Yes.
Oh, that was not what my understanding was. I'm glad I asked.
And then we'll start up again with redirect, and it might require moving the juries in and out depending on the nature of the redirect and if it relates to just one defendant or the other.
All right. Lastly, I wanted to reiterate my understanding of the court's ruling as to the permissible scope of cross-examination to Dr. Oziel regarding the instances that are outlined in the accusation. My recollection, the court said that the fact that he had been on probation could be brought up, the fact that the accusation had been filed had been brought up, that could be brought up, the fact of anything specific to Judelon Smith's activities in regards to the Menendez case could be brought up, and that he could be asked about his acquaintanceship with other women or people listed in the accusation, but that the specific instances of misconduct alleged therein that are not relevant specifically to the Menendez case would not be brought up. Is that correct?
Well, I don't recall reference to other individuals named in the complaint, whether that was raised by anybody or not. I don't know what relevance it would have if, other than to lay a foundation for something that happens later on. But I don't recall that specifically, but everything else is correct.
All right.
I think the understanding was there's only one other individual named in the complaint.
Yeah.
And I think the only reason it would be brought up is for foundational purposes.
Just to ask, did you ever know that person? Okay.
Okay, I would like then to run outside and correct Dr. Oziel's transcript as to page 9, things that we.
Okay, we also need a short hearing, I think, regarding an area that the defense failed to bring to a head last week in regards to something that is claimed to be privileged.
Yes, so the people know what this hearing is about. It has to do with the statement attributed to Erik about his father near disinheriting him. I'm seeking a privilege ruling from the court by having Dr. Oziel testify about certain things relevant to that, so that people know what we're doing. And I need a brief break.
Okay, we'll take a recess until 10:15, at which time we'll resume with Dr. Oziel in a closed courtroom on this subject, which I don't believe would take very long, and then we should be ready to start with the jury at 10:30.
Judge, can I be just brief?
Yes.
Does the court have any objection to Ms. Menacing and Lyle remaining at council table during the direct examination of Oziel and friend Erik Menendez in the jury? We feel we should hear his testimony. Seating is limited, as the court knows.
May I suggest, though, that maybe instead of sitting at council table, unless you need your materials, you can just pull yourself over to the railing there, inside the railing.
Sure.
There's no
Be right here.
Yeah, just pull your seats back if there's room.
We can do that.
So that you wouldn't actually be at council table, since there's no need for extra exhibits or anything. You have space there.
Thank you.
All right, we'll resume in 5 minutes, and then everybody will be able to come back in at 10:30. The defendant, Erik Menendez, is in court with his attorneys. The people are represented, and the Erik Menendez jury is in the courtroom. Good morning to you all. And we're ready to resume with the trial. People will call their next witness.
Thank you, Ryan. The people call L. Jerome Oziel.
Would you raise your right hand?
we follow the instructions of testimony you may give the cause or opinion before the court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I did.
Please take the stand and state your name and rank.
Dr. L. Jerome Oziel,
What do you like to say?
O-Z-I-E-L.
All right, Mr. Curiel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Oziel, what is your occupation?
I'm a psychologist.
In the early fall of 1988, did you begin seeing Erik and Lyle Menendez relating to incidents which occurred in Calabasas in which the defendants were involved?
Yes, I did.
Drawing your attention to the date of October 31st, 1989, did you see Erik Menendez on the afternoon approximately 4:15 on that date?
Yes, I did.
Had the defendant, Erik Menendez, gotten in touch with you shortly before that?
That's correct.
Do you recall about when he got in touch with you?
I believe it was either 1 day or 2 days ahead of time.
Did he set up a session with you?
Yes, he did.
On that particular day, would you describe what occurred as Erik Menendez arrived at your office?
Yes, and may I ask the court if I can refer to notes during this or whether I should?
Yes, if you have notes and they'll help you in some way in your testimony, you may refer to them.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Oziel, did you prepare notes shortly after this session, October
Yes.
31st?
I did. These are the notes. Erik came in and he was extremely agitated and extremely depressed, and he began talking with me about the fact that his parents had been murdered and that he felt very isolated and very alienated, and he'd lost a lot of weight. He had had some suicidal ideation, and he just began disclosing a lot of things that had to do with feeling depressed and feeling lost.
Did he talk about having dreams?
Yes, he talked about having some nightmares that were very vivid images of his parents being dead, and having images of the scene of having seen them dead.
At some point, did he ask to leave your office?
Yes, he did.
Would you describe that for the jurors?
Yes. Erik had told me that he wanted to take a walk. I wasn't sure exactly what the reason was, but he said he wanted to take a walk and tell me something that was, they didn't want to tell me inside the office.
Excuse me, Honor, is there any particular reason why the witness is facing away from?
I asked the witness to describe
All right,
what happened.
He asked me to tell the jurors, and I thought that meant to.
that's fine. You may
Tell the
face whichever way you want. Go ahead.
Okay. He, after telling me a lot of detail about his depression and his feelings of despair, at some point in the session, he asked me to take a walk with him and to leave the actual physical office that we were in. So we did take a walk. We walked outside the office and to a small restaurant called the Bagel Nosh, and just used the restroom facilities there, and then took a walk from the Bagel Nosh to a strip of land that is park-like in Beverly Hills. He sat on a bench, and for a significant period of time, Erik told me things about his father and how his father was a great man, and how he intended to write a book about his father, and that it was amazing that his father wouldn't be able to fulfill a lot of the goals that he'd had, a lot of the ambitions, and maybe he could help do that in a book that he would write. And at some point in the session, as we were sitting in the park, we just discussed going back to the office, and we headed back to the office. And right before we entered the front door of the office building in which I had my office, he leaned back against, as I recall, a parking meter that was in front of the office door, and said, "We did it." And I don't know if he said we killed our parents, but I asked him, "You mean you killed your parents?" He said yes. And from that point, we went back up into the office.
And your office is located in Beverly Hills?
That's correct.
After he said that "We did it," did you ascertain from him who he was referring to besides himself?
Yes.
And who was that
was
other person?
Lyle.
Did you then go into your office?
Yes, we did.
And what happened there?
Well, from that point on, Erik began describing in pretty elaborate detail exactly what happened. He began to tell me all about how the murder took place and all the details of the murder.
And what did he say in that regard?
Well, he told me that it began with the plan to kill the parents actually began in a situation where Erik was watching a BBC television show or movie, I'm not sure which it was, that had to do with the theme of the person in the film killing their father. And at some point in the watching of it, Erik called Lyle in the room and shared with him what the content was of the movie. And as I recall, Erik said it began with sort of a casual conversation between the two of them. They started discussing what would happen or how it would be if the person who was a dominating force and a negative force and a very controlling person in their life wasn't there anymore. And at that point, it evolved into a discussion about killing the parents, most particularly the father first, and then the parents. And that's the way the actual discussion began.
Did Erik Menendez describe for you in particular what it was that he was upset with his father about?
Yes, he did.
What did he say?
Well, basically that the father had just been completely dominating and controlling, was impossible to please, had perfectionistic standards, that he was controlling of a lot of different aspects of Erik and Lyle's life in a very extreme way, and also that he had been very controlling and very damaging to their mother, and that she also was miserable. So basically, they conceptualized the father. Erik told me that they saw the father as someone who was pretty much not possible to live with. That he was just an emotionally dominating, tyrannical person.
In describing why Erik Menendez was upset with his father, you had stated that they had planned to kill the father, but also the mother. Did you ask Erik Menendez why he included the mother in this plan?
At this point, I believe I did. And the reason that the mother was included in the plan was basically that they couldn't find a way not to include her in the plan. And they also began to see the mother as somebody who was very victimized by the father. She had apparently been suicidal before, and they couldn't find a way to accomplish the end of killing the father without also killing the mother. The reason being that the mother would have been a witness, number one, and would have reported them. Number two, they didn't believe that the mother could have survived emotionally anyway without the father. And three, they thought the mother was so miserable that it was, and this is not Erik's words, sort of like a euthanasia situation.
I'd move to strike if it's not Erik's words.
The euthanasia was not Erik's words.
All right, why don't you pursue that, Mr. Priala? The answer is, that particular word is strict.
Thank you, Your Honor. Did Erik Menendez indicate to you?
Your Honor, also at this point, I would object and move to strike the last answer because it does not appear to be responsive to the question about what was being said by Erik Menendez on October 31st in this early portion of the discussion.
Right, the objection is overruled, but you'll have to, or either on direct or cross, clarify the matter. All right, your next question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Did Erik Menendez indicate to you, Doctor, that he felt his mother was unhappy at that time?
Yes, he did.
Now, would you describe for the jurors what steps in planning the murders that Erik recounted to you in this session?
Well, Your Honor, I'm going to object to leading in that method. This witness, based on the notes, I don't think that's an appropriate question.
Objection rule.
Okay. Well, Erik relayed to me that at the point that he and Lyle had discussed planning the murder, that Erik felt a need to commit the murder relatively quickly, or he basically thought that he would lose the emotional ability to commit the act. Lyle, according to Erik's recounting, wanted to take some time to plan it out more effectively, to make sure that it was as perfect as could be. And Erik just didn't feel that he could do that. So they had agreed that they would commit the murder, and they were negotiating how soon to do it. After that point, what they did, and I believe, the best of my recollection, it was something like a week or so before the murder.
Wait, hold it right there, Dr. Oziel. This discussion about planning the murder occurred 1 week before the actual murder? Is that
That's
what
the
you're saying?
best of my recollection.
Okay. Approximately 1 week.
Something like that.
Okay.
What they did at that point, I mean, I should clarify, it could have been a
Well,
week.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this point. The preceding part of the answer was not responsive, but
I'll
the
ask
witness
another
is
question.
being asked what was done by way of planning.
All right, the objection is overruled. The answer will stand, but if you can clarify this, Mr. Kuriyama.
Thank you, Your Honor. This discussion that Erik Menendez related to you that he was having with his brother Lyle about planning the murders of their parents, is it your understanding that that discussion, by what Erik Menendez told you, occurred about a week before the actual killings?
It's my understanding that it occurred at least a week before, based upon my recollection. At that point, what they did, according to Erik, was drive to San Diego, obtain some false identification, purchase 2 shotguns with the false identification, drive back to Los Angeles, and then create or have an alibi in the form of a wine and cheese tasting party. And then shortly before the party began, Erik recounted to me that they surprised their parents in the room in which their parents were found murdered. And according to Erik's recounting, as I recall it,
Excuse me, Your Honor, but I think that the question was, what was the planning?
All right, the objection is sustained. At this point, you can ask another question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Oziel, did Erik Menendez use the term surprised when he was referring to what they did when they walked into the room? They surprised their parents?
I recall that he did.
Did he, Erik Menendez, describe for you what took place at the crime scene, what they did with the shotguns?
Yes. As I recall, Erik said that that he entered the room first, and I believe that he was shooting at his father, and then Lyle followed after him, and basically, quote, Lyle finished off the job. It's not clear to me entirely who was primarily responsible for shooting the mother and who's primarily responsible for shooting the father.
Based on what Erik Menendez told you, was it your impression that both brothers shot at their parents?
Well, let me ask a point of clarification here.
Excuse me, Your Honor, but we would object. I think the question can be answered yes or no.
Well, do you understand the question, or do you need some clarification?
I think I need some clarification.
All right, and why don't you ask another question and see if you can do it that way, Mr. Kuriyama?
Is it your impression, Dr. Oziel, that both brothers fired their shotguns.
This is a question asked of Dr. Oziel regarding what Erik Menendez told
Yeah.
him at this time.
Correct.
Yes, it is.
Did Erik Menendez tell you what occurred at the crime scene as they were shooting their parents?
Yes, he did.
What did he say?
Erik told me that his father said something like no, no, and turned away and was shot as he was saying that. And the mother was, I think, shot second, and I guess began to stand or something of that nature, and was shot and then fell to the ground. And he relayed to me that the father, as I recall it, died first, and the mother did not die with the first shots that were fired at her. And that what happened at that point is that both Erik and Lyle went outside to get some more cartridges and reloaded the shotguns, and went in, and Lyle, I believe, finished murdering their mother.
Did Erik Menendez describe for you what his mother was doing on the floor that necessitated them having to reload the shotguns?
Yes, he did.
What did he say to you?
He said that she was moaning and trying.
Are not present. This matter is here today for discussion and resolution of any matters that must precede the testimony of Dr. Oziel, who is the next witness. And we did have a brief discussion yesterday afternoon on that subject. And the court directed counsel to
Both Erik and Lyle went outside to get some more cartridges and the ground. And he relayed to me that the father, as I recall it, died first, and the mother did not die with the first shots that were fired at her. And that what happened at that point is that both Erik and Lyle went outside to get some more cartridges and reloaded the shotguns, and went in, and Lyle, I believe, finished murdering their mother.
Did Erik Menendez describe for you what his mother was doing on the floor that necessitated them having to reload the shotguns?
Yes, he did.
What did he say to you?
He said that she was moaning and trying to crawl.
Did he indicate to you that after they returned, after loading or reloading their shotguns, that one brother in particular shot the mother?
I'm going to object to the form of the question in particular.
All right, rephrase the question, please.
Dr. Oziel, did Erik Menendez tell you who it was that finally killed the mother?
Best of my recollection, it was that Lyle did.
Did Erik Menendez tell you what happened after both parents were then dead, what they did at the crime scene?
Yes,
What did he say?
at the crime scene, or
What did he say that he did along with his brother at the crime scene?
what they did is go back into their car and try to pick up all of the casings or shotgun shells that might have been around, and then take their change of clothes, I guess, with them. And then are you asking me what happened?
Let me ask you this question. Did Erik Menendez describe for you the scene of the room in which he and his brother had killed their parents?
Yes, he did.
How did he describe that scene to you?
That there was blood all over the room and pieces of tissue all over the room.
Did he indicate to you that he had gotten blood on his clothing?
Yes, I believe he indicated that both brothers had gotten blood on their clothing.
And did he tell you what he did with that clothing?
Yes, he did.
What did he say?
He said that they changed the clothing and put it into a bag and dumped it into a dumpster.
At the crime scene where the parents were killed, did he indicate to you that he had picked up any evidence from that location?
Yes, he did.
What did he say?
That he picked up the casings or shotgun shells that might have been left as evidence and prepared to dispose of them.
Did he describe for you where, that is, Erik Menendez went to dispose of the bloody clothes that he had placed in the bag?
Just to a dumpster. I don't recall which dumpster it was or where. I don't think he told me.
Like one of those big green bins?
He didn't describe it in that much detail.
Did Erik Menendez tell you what he did with the shotguns that were used?
Yes, he did.
What did he say?
He said that he and Lyle drove to Mulholland Drive, and that I think it was Lyle stayed in the car and acted sort of as a scout, and Erik, or lookout, I should say, and that Erik took the shotguns and brought them, best of my recollection, was something like 250 feet down the side of the hill off of Mulholland, and placed them there. And as I recall, he didn't actually say that he buried them, but that they were above ground, and he sort of tried to cover them up a bit. I think they were relatively exposed.
Did he describe for you what he changed into from his bloody clothes?
Just into new clothing.
Okay. And did he tell you what he did after secreting the shotguns? What did he do next?
I think that they then went to the party. I'm sort of losing I think they went to the party afterwards.
Did he tell you what happened after going to this wine tasting party?
Yes, he did.
What did he do after that?
When you say, for clarification, what did he do? Are you asking me only about Erik, or what he related to me about Lyle as well?
At this point, I want to know what Erik told you. If it includes Lyle, you can testify about that as well.
Excuse me, Your Honor, before there's an answer, can I confer with counsel for a minute?
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Oziel, did Erik Menendez tell you anything about having an alibi for the killings?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. Ask to approach.
Dr. Oziel, after Erik indicated to you that he went to this wine tasting party in Santa Monica after disposing of the guns, did he indicate to you that he returned to his house?
Yes, he did.
And did he indicate to you that 911 was called?
Yes, he did.
Did he indicate to you that the police did not initially link them to the crime?
Yes, he did.
And did he at that time tell you that they had an alibi, being the wine tasting party?
That's correct.
Did he also tell you that the police had thought that the mafia or some business connections had murdered his parents?
That's correct.
And that he and his brother were not primary suspects at that time?
That's correct.
Did he indicate to you in this session that they were at that point being treated as the aggrieved sons?
I don't know that he used those words, aggrieved sons. I mean, he may have described something that approximated that, but he didn't say aggrieved sons.
Okay. Did he indicate to you on that date that he was starting to have difficulty dealing with the fact that he would be inheriting $15 million or splitting that with his brother?
Yes, he did.
Did he tell you that his guilt was overwhelming and he had to come in and tell you?
That's correct.
At that point, in the session of the 31st of October, did you ask Erik Menendez whether Lyle Menendez knew that what Erik was telling you?
Yes, I did.
And what information did you get from Erik Menendez on that?
That Lyle absolutely did not know that Erik was telling me, and that Erik was frightened about Lyle's reaction should he find out.
Find out that Erik had told somebody of what they had done?
Had confessed the murders to me, yes.
You may want to take a look at your notes on page 6.
Okay, I have them.
Now,
Do you want me to read them over?
if you would.
Okay. I've read them over.
Dr. Oziel, did Erik Menendez indicate to you on October 31st, 1989, that there was no way to link him and his brother to the murders?
Yes, he did.
Okay, would you describe for the jurors what it is he actually said to you?
To the best of my recollection, what he said is that there were fingerprints in the house, but they were their fingerprints and they lived in the house, so that wasn't a linkage. To the best of their knowledge, no one heard anything. So there were no witnesses who had heard any sounds or anything at the time that the murder was committed. That there were no weapons that had been found, and he didn't believe that there was any way to link the weapons which had been hidden to them. And so basically, insofar as he knew, it was a perfect murder. There was no way to link he or Lyle to having committed the murder, except through my knowing about it.
Did he tell you that he believed there was no way to tie them into buying the weapons at the San Diego gun store?
Yes, he did.
And did he further tell you that there was no way on earth to link them to the murders?
Words to that effect, yes.
At that point, at the point of learning that Lyle Menendez did not know that Erik Menendez had confessed to you, did you have a discussion with Erik Menendez about bringing in Lyle Menendez?
Yes, I did.
And what was that discussion?
Well, the discussion was that I was extremely concerned.
Objection, Your Honor, not responsive. The question is, what was the discussion?
All right, is that what you're answering?
Yes, I was trying to relate what the discussion was.
Okay, objection overruled.
I believe at some point after I asked Erik whether Lyle knew that he was confessing to me, I asked him what he felt Lyle's response would be if I told him. or I mean, if he told him, if Erik told him, and he had a response such that he was afraid that Lyle would kill him. And I asked him if I told him that I thought it was important to find out what Lyle's reaction would be, because he felt very threatened about telling Lyle, and also because very clearly Lyle was not a patient of mine at that time.
Objection, Your Honor, not responsive.
Right.
Move to strike.
Objection is sustained as far as anything beyond the first part of that answer and reference to Lyle at the end of the answer is stricken as non-responsive.
Dr. Oziel, did Erik Menendez indicate to you that he believed that his brother would be upset with him because Erik had told you what they had done?
That's correct.
And at some point, did you call Lyle Menendez in to your office?
Yes, after asking Erik's permission to do so.
Did you get the permission of Erik Menendez to do so?
Yes, I did.
Now, in addition to what you've testified to about Erik Menendez stating that his father was impossible to deal with, he had impossible standards, he was controlling, did Erik Menendez tell you anything about an incident which occurred in Calabasas as being another reason for Erik Menendez being upset?
Your Honor, I think that's awfully vague. I think we should simply direct the witness.
Wait, just state your objection. The objection is vague.
It's vague.
All right, do you understand the question?
No, actually, I'd like to have it
Okay.
repeated.
Why don't you restate it?
I'll ask Dr. Oziel to take a look at page 12 of your notes.
Okay, I have page 12.
Your Honor, I would
That-
object at this point without clarification that, just make sure. I'm not up to date here. Wait a second. Yeah, I would object to anything being elicited from page 12 without a foundation being laid as to what day we're talking about and who's present.
Okay, you're moving on to a separate conversation, are you?
Yes, Your Honor.
A different one? Well, you'd have to
So-
lay some sort of foundation for that before
I'll
you
do that, Your Honor.
No, like the other one.
Dr. Oziel, did you have another session, the second session being a joint session with both Erik and Lyle Menendez?
That's correct.
And this was 2 days after the October 31st
You're
session?
referring to the November
Second.
2nd session? Yes.
Correct. During that November 2nd session, attended by both Lyle and Erik Menendez, was there a conversation about the brothers giving reasons for why they wanted to murder their father?
Objection, Your Honor, to leading that way. I think that's misstating where the evidence is going.
Objection overruled.
Yes.
Dr. Oziel, referring to the last full paragraph, the second sentence,
On page 12, counsel.
yes.
I'm sorry, which paragraph and which sentence?
It's the last full paragraph,
Yes.
and it's the second sentence.
Okay.
Did Lyle Menendez describe how Jose Menendez had taunted both Erik and himself for the Calabasas burglaries by making fun of Erik and him?
I'm going to object to leading at this point, Your Honor. I would rather the witness at least read what's actually written there than have Mr. Kuriyama.
Okay, objection is overruled. This has been a subject of discussion before, and that it was agreed that certain questions may be asked in a leading fashion, so objection is overruled.
Well, then I would
You may
object
proceed.
to Mr. Kuriyama misreading. the
Okay,
question.
counsel, let's proceed in the way that we had agreed. All right, you may proceed, Mr. Kuriyama.
And further, I'll quote it, telling us how stupid we were for doing it in ways that left the police all sorts of clues as to how it had been done. Did Lyle Menendez make that statement in the presence of Erik Menendez to you on November 2nd?
Yes, Lyle did.
And what happened right after that?
Right
If you
after
look-
he made
if you-
the statement,
Yes, if you look at the following paragraph.
that Erik and Lyle discussed that they thought that were it not for the fact that the father had turned them in, that they had committed the Calabasas burglary so perfectly that they would not have been caught.
They specifically mentioned that to you on November 2nd when they were telling you the reasons why they're upset with their father?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to that following statement because that misrepresents the evidence.
Overruled.
Is that correct, Dr. Oziel?
That's correct.
Finally, referring to page 19 of your notes, the middle paragraph in the last sentence. And this again occurred on November 2nd, 1989.
That's
Is that
correct.
correct? Would you describe for the jurors what Erik Menendez said regarding an inheritance?
In the context of talking about how impossible the father was, Erik also recounted his father's near disinheritance of him as an example of one of the things that that led to, or was an example of why they had to kill the father.
Thank you. I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor.
All right, and the defense will defer cross-examination until after the other testimony of the witness before both juries.
That's what I understand.
Right, that was how we're going to proceed. So what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, have the other jury come in, and they'll sit in the courtroom at the same time, and the witness's testimony will resume with both juries present. So it takes us a few minutes to have the center section of the courtroom cleared. So what I would ask that you do is just go into the jury room for the amount of time it takes to get the other jury in, and then we'll proceed with both defendants and both juries. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it, and we'll have it back in here in just a few minutes. Have you back in. Case of People versus Erik Menendez and People versus Lyle Menendez. Both juries are now in the courtroom. The Lyle Menendez jury is in the audience section. The Erik Menendez jury is in the jury box. And to those in the audience section, the Lyle Menendez jury, good morning. And we're ready to resume with the trial. And we have a witness. People may call that witness at this time.
People call Dr. Oziel to the stand.
I do. Dr. L. Jerome Oziel. O-Z-I-E-L.
All right, Mrs. Bozanich.
Thank you. Dr. Oziel, what do you do for a living, please?
I'm a clinical psychologist.
On October the 31st of 1989, did you make a telephone call from your office to Lyle Menendez?
Yes, I did.
And when you had the telephone call with Lyle Menendez, what did you tell him and what did he reply?
I told him words to the effect, your brothers told me everything. And his response was something like, what do you mean by everything? And I said something about needing to be circumspect, and I thought he would know what I meant. And he said he would be right over.
At the time that you made the telephone call to Lyle Menendez, was Erik Menendez in the office with you?
Yes, he was.
About how much time elapsed before Lyle Menendez arrived?
I would say maybe only 10, 15 minutes.
When Lyle Menendez arrived at your office, and was your office on North Bedford Drive in Beverly Hills at the time?
That's correct.
When Lyle Menendez arrived at your office, did he enter into the office?
He did.
And could you please describe his demeanor when he came into the office where you and Erik were?
He was extremely upset, threatening, menacing. He was just extremely, I think, threatened and threatening.
And when you say that he was threatened and threatening, did he say anything at that time that led you to this conclusion?
Well, I think initially he began, he was very angry at Erik, and he was.
The objection is sustained. The answer is stricken.
Did he express his anger verbally by saying anything to his brother Erik?
Yes, he did. He got into a major argument with Erik about how could he have done something like this? How could he possibly have told me what they did and confessed all this to me? And how could he have done it without having first told Lyle that he was going to do it? What kind of loyalty did Erik have as a brother?
Okay, now, let me stop you for a moment. When he referred to Erik doing it, what was it that Erik had done?
Confessed the murders.
Now, in your testimony right now, you're referring to some notes in front of you. Are those notes that you prepared in relationship to these things that you're going to testify to?
Yes, these are notes that were prepared shortly after these sessions in question.
All right. Now, after, could you continue and tell us the remainder of the conversation that was done in your presence between yourself and Lyle with Erik there?
Objection before the question calls for now.
All right, let's get on to more specifics.
All right. Did Erik Menendez try to explain to Lyle Menendez at that point why it was that he had confessed to you?
Yes.
All right, and what was Eric's explanation for Lyle?
Well, his explanation was that he needed to confess to somebody, and he needed to confess to me, and he knew that if he had told Lyle about it ahead of time, that Lyle would have said no, absolutely not, and then Erik would have confessed anyway, and they would have had a huge fight over that.
Approximately 2 days later, on November the 2nd of 1989, did you have a second meeting with Erik and Lyle Menendez?
Yes,
And was this again at the office that you've described on North Bedford Drive?
it was.
And to the best of your recollection, how had this second meeting been arranged?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, was it prearranged or was it a spontaneous thing? I guess.
No, it was prearranged.
How did the session begin on November the 2nd?
Well, the two of them came in together. And when you say how did it begin,
What was the topic that was first discussed, if you recall?
I think I started talking about how Lyle and how Erik had no choice but to have really confessed the murders to me. And I was explaining this to Lyle. And I said that, at least it might have been some benefit because I was a therapist and might be able to help them. And potentially there might be some confidentiality with respect to that.
Now, when you say confidentiality, at some point, did you explain the concept of confidentiality to them?
Yes.
Was it at this point in the conversation or later on?
Well, I first of all, I explained the concept of confidentiality when we initiated treatment.
But as far as,
But in relationship to these two sessions,
yes, in relationship to the session, November the 2nd, did you explain to Lyle Menendez the parameters of confidentiality and his brother Erik as well?
mostly I described the limits of confidentiality and also the parameters of it.
All right, before I get into that, I'm going to ask you some more questions. Did you indicate to both Erik and Lyle Menendez on November the 2nd of 1989 that you might be able to be helpful to them in the event that they were ever brought to trial?
Yes.
Could you tell us briefly what that conversation was about?
I'm sorry, which date are we referring to?
On November the 2nd,
Yes.
when they both came in together,
Mhm.
did you indicate to them that you might be able to piece together some of the family events in order
Yes.
to provide them with some aid or some?
Yes, the reason I sounded confused about that is that I had a similar conversation, I think, two different occasions with them. So I wasn't sure which one you're referring to, but yes, I did.
Can we strike all of that, Your Honor?
Yes, the objection is sustained. The answer is stricken. Why don't you re-ask that question?
Yes, Dr. Oziel, did you have a conversation near the beginning portion of November the 2nd? Referring to page 8, please, of your notes, the bottom, the last two sentences.
Yes.
And during this conversation, what did you tell them about what you might be able to do for them in the event that they were ever brought to trial for their parents' murders?
Just basically put together some of the factors that had been going on in their family that specifically the hatred and the emotional abuse that they'd had with respect to the relationship with their father in particular that could have led to the murder taking place.
At that point, did Lyle mention to you that he hadn't thought of your possession of this information in that particular way, that it could be of use?
That's correct.
And at that point, did you tell him that you had kept notes from the October 31st session and placed them in a safety deposit box?
Yes, I did.
And what did you tell him that you did in regards to the safety deposit box?
I told him that I believed that there were 3 safety deposit boxes, not one, and that I had placed notes in the safety deposit box with a note or notes that stated that if I were to mysteriously disappear or be murdered under a certain set of circumstances, suspicious accident, that the notes that I had taken would be revealed.
And did you tell Lyle and Erik Menendez why you had taken this precaution?
Yes, I did.
What was your reasoning that you told them?
Because I felt in the prior session that that there was a strong threat to my life.
Now, at that point, did Lyle Menendez respond to you? And I'm referring now to page 9, the last third of the page. Did Lyle Menendez respond to you after you said that you had felt threatened after October the 31st?
Yes, he did.
And what did he say to you about that?
Well, he laughed and he said that I should have felt threatened because immediately after the session, he and Erik had sat in Erik's new Jeep, and the first statement that Lyle had made to Erik when he got into the Jeep was, "Now how do we kill Oziel?" And he continued to relate that Erik said in this course of this conversation that he wasn't up to killing anybody else right now, and that if Lyle wanted to kill me, that he should go ahead and kill me.
Now, when was it that Erik made the statement that he wasn't up to killing anyone else and that Lyle should do it? Was that a statement that occurred in the Jeep, or was that a statement that occurred in your office?
Well, the initial statement,
I'm going to object to the form of the question. I don't believe the witnesses testified. He ever heard Erik.
All right, why don't you rephrase the question so you clarify exactly what you're asking?
Dr. Oziel, I believe you indicated that after you explained the fact of the safety deposit boxes and what measures you had taken, that Lyle indicated to you that you should have felt threatened because he and his brother had gone to the Jeep after the October 31st session and had discussed killing you. Is that correct?
yes, that's what he related.
And all right. And then what was Erik's response to that, and how did that occur?
What was his response to it in the session, or what was Lyle's reported response to it in Erik's Jeep?
What was Lyle's reported response in Erik's Jeep?
You mean Erik's reported response in Lyle's Jeep?
Yes.
Yes. No?
Erik's reported response.
What did Lyle Menendez tell you that Erik had told him when they're in the Jeep?
Okay. Lyle Menendez told me that Erik had said that he was not up to killing anybody else right now, and that if Lyle wanted to kill me, that Lyle should go ahead and kill me.
Now, Lyle told you this about a conversation that had taken place between himself and his brother about 2 days before, correct?
That's correct.
And he told this to you in the presence of his brother, Erik Menendez. Is that correct?
Yes, he did.
Okay. What next happened?
Well, actually,
Did Lyle?
both Erik and Lyle were at this point laughing.
No, there's no question pending.
Yes, there
The
was.
objection is overruled. The question is what happened next?
What happened next is that Erik and Lyle were laughing in the office, both of them, and Lyle said that. I'm sorry.
Okay, and then did Lyle relate to you further any conversations that he and his brother had had on the 31st?
Yes, he did.
And what did he tell you about what they had talked about on the 31st after seeing you?
We said that they began laughing because they were sitting in the Jeep and looking back up to the office that I was located in, and they were imagining me looking down on the Jeep and seeing them having this discussion and knowing very well that they were planning to kill me, and they were laughing at how frightened I must have been, realizing that they were sitting in the Jeep talking about planning to kill me.
Now, just to clarify, when you say that they were laughing on October 31st in the Jeep, or they were laughing in relating to you what had occurred on the 31st?
No, I'm sorry. Lyle never said, no one ever said that they were laughing when they were in the Jeep until after they began, at the point at which they were sitting in the Jeep and began looking up and imagining me looking down and realizing that they were talking about how to kill me, that's the point at which they were laughing. But he didn't say they were laughing or relate that they were laughing before that. In the office, when it was being relayed to me on November 2nd, they were again laughing.
Now, after they
were laughing.
All right, after it was related to you, what had occurred, did Lyle Menendez give you an explanation for why this hadn't occurred? Or that they had to abandon this idea?
Yes, he did.
What did he say?
He said that it wouldn't look too good if I disappeared too soon, because if I did, it might begin to cast an unwelcome light on them, that if the Menendez's therapist disappeared soon, and might not be a good idea. And then after that, I'm sorry.
Okay, and then after that, did Lyle turn to you and say something?
Yes, he did.
Did he ask you a question?
Yes, he did.
What did he ask you?
He asked me if I was frightened
And what did you respond?
about what he had just told me. And I said that I really didn't choose to live in fear ordinarily. It wasn't how I really chose to live my life.
And what did he respond to you when you said that you did not choose to live your life in fear?
He said, neither did my father.
Did you go on to explain that what your point was in having them there?
Yes.
And what did you tell them?
Well, I told them that that anybody could be killed, and that I got the message. But the point was that I thought that what we were trying to do here was to try to work to help resolve whatever issues they had emotionally that led them to commit the murder to begin with.
Did they continue on to tell you that they had hated their father and why they had to kill him?
Yes.
Referring now to bottom of page 10 in your notes.
Yes, they did.
Okay, could you please tell us, this discussion was it had by both defendants or by one or the other? How did that occur?
It was in a mutual discussion between the two of them.
And what did they explain to you about why they had killed their father?
Well, that basically they hated their father, that they felt they had to kill him because he was constantly, this was a lengthy conversation, that he ridiculed them, he put them down, he controlled their every activity, he controlled them in all ways, he made them feel not adequate, he made them feel inferior, he dominated them, he couldn't be pleased. That he preached living perfectly in a higher moral level, but then at the same time he would say other things that were very confusing to them.
Okay, now let me ask you this.
Uh-huh.
After they told you about the fact that he preached morality to them, but that he did things that might have been inconsistent, did you point this out to them?
Yes, I did.
And what was their response to your pointing out to them the inconsistency between their father preaching morality, but then treating them the way he did?
Could you ask me that more specifically?
All right. Did you ask the defendants if this appeared to be, the father's conduct appeared to be incompatible with being a moral person?
Yes, I did.
Did they express to you some confusion over their father?
Yes, they did. They said that they were confused because they saw him as being a moral person, and they didn't really know of any behavior that he engaged in that was immoral.
Now, did they indicate to you that they wanted to write a book about their father?
Yes, I did.
And did they indicate to you, was the book going to be praiseworthy or condemnatory? Do you recall?
It was in the extreme going to be praiseworthy.
Now, did they indicate to you at that point one of the reasons, in light of this novel that they wanted to write, one of the reasons they had killed him? What,
I don't understand what you're asking.
did the defendants indicate to you that they considered it an accomplishment to have killed their father?
Yes, that most particularly with how well it had been done.
Now, at some point during this portion of the discussion, and I'm referring now to your notes on page 11, the largest paragraph, did you ask them about their mother?
Yes, I did.
And did you ask them why they killed their mother?
Yes, I did.
And what was the explanation given to you?
Well, the explanation was that the mother was when Lyle and Erik were both there, they had a discussion, and the context of the discussion was that the mother was more or less a victim, that she was a victim of the father, that the father had nothing but an abusive relationship with her, and that she was controlled by him, and she was miserable, that she had been suicidal, and that they couldn't conceive of her being able to live effectively or wanting to live effectively if the father wasn't there or was murdered anyway, and also that the mother was a witness. And if in fact they left the mother alive, they couldn't think of any way to be able to kill the father and escape detection. So the only way that they knew of to be able to kill the father was also to kill the mother. And this was an issue that they had gone back and forth and debated about prior to the murder.
Pardon me, but what was the issue that they had gone back and forth over and debated about?
Whether the mother really should be killed, because their emotional sense, as they related to me, was that the mother didn't deserve to be killed on her own and for who she was, but yet they couldn't find or figure any way to be able to proceed with murdering the father without also murdering the mother. And so their overall conclusion was that the only way that they could achieve this end of murdering the father was to also murder the mother. And then in addition to that, or I should also say, as a part of that decision, they also felt that they were putting the mother out of her misery, that she was a miserable, unhappy lady, and by killing her, they would be putting her out of her misery.
Did they indicate to you anything about the plan to murder the parents? In other words, anything about making a perfect plan or about killing the parents?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and was that in relationship to this explanation of killing the mother?
Well, it followed the conversation. And yes, there was a conversation about that.
Did they indicate to you that part of the reason that the mother was killed is the plan to kill the father included her, and that the plan was very good and they didn't want to deviate from it?
I would object to that, Jerome. This makes it, and it's a leading question.
All right, why don't you refer the witness to the specific page if you could.
Referring now to the bottom of page 11, Dr. Oziel, the last sentence, and up until the page 12, the first paragraph. Why don't you review your notes and then tell us what was said about plan?
Erik and Lyle felt that the plan that they had formed to commit the murder was a perfect plan. They felt it was a plan that wouldn't allow for any detection of it, and they could not figure out a way to kill the father without also killing the mother. And so they felt if they didn't kill the mother, they wouldn't have any way to proceed with killing the father. So although they actually felt their mother didn't...
This has already been asked and answered. We've already heard this.
Overruled. All right, you may continue.
although they felt that the mother didn't deserve to die and shouldn't die, they included her in the plan along with killing their father because it was the only way that they could figure out to kill their father.
And during this discussion, did they use the word perfect in terms of the crime?
To the best of my recollection, yes, I did.
Subsequent to this, did Erik Menendez, in the presence of his brother Lyle Menendez, relate to you something about the mother locking the bedroom?
Yes, he did.
What did he tell you in the presence of his brother?
He told me that that several days before the murder, that Erik said that he began to feel bad because he began to notice that his mother was getting very nervous and agitated and began locking the doors to the bedroom. And he felt that she probably had a sense that something very ominous was going to happen to her. And that's why she, in a sense, knew that it was going to happen. And that's why she began locking the door.
And then at that point, did Lyle tell you something about the father?
Yes, that the father made some sort of comment about you can kill me if you want to, but you won't get any money if you do. Words to that effect.
Now referring to page 13, Dr. Oziel.
Yes.
Subsequent to this discussion about the mother and the father as related to you by Erik and Lyle Menendez, did Erik say anything about he and his brother having a discussion about what might happen to them one day if they had children?
Yes, he did.
And what did he say to you?
Erik said that he and Lyle had discussed the possibility that someday, that if they had children, that their children might rise up and kill them.
At that point, did
As they
Lyle,
kill their parents, yeah.
at that point, did Lyle Menendez indicate to you any feelings of sadness he might have had about his mother?
Yes, he did.
And what did he tell you? And this was in the presence of his brother, is that correct?
Yes, it was.
What did he tell you?
He told me that he was very sad about having killed his mother, and he didn't even like to think about the fact that that he had killed his mother. He told me that he didn't have any real maternal feelings toward her, and he didn't really respond to her as being a mother figure. He saw her as a pitiful person, somebody who was just completely dominated by the father, Jose, and that she had a lot of potential, and that she was very bright, and there are all sorts of things she maybe could have been, but that she really never was able to do any of those things.
And then did he acknowledge something to you about his mother
What are you referring
in
to?
terms of participating in her murder?
Yes, he did.
What did he tell you?
He acknowledged that he fired the shots that actually killed his mother in the end.
Now, I believe you've testified that about Lyle and Erik Menendez. Do you see them both in the courtroom today?
Yes, I do.
And where is Erik Menendez seated?
Your Honor, we'll stipulate that the witness knows.
All right.
That's fine.
All right, you can ask a question if you want.
That's fine.
All right, do
I will
both
accept the
sides
stipulation.
stipulate then that the witness is identifying the defendants at counsel table?
Yes.
All right. All right, how much more do you have to go? Well, let's just take a break
Yeah,
here so that we can resume
yes, quite a
at,
bit.
okay. We'll resume at 1:30, ladies and gentlemen. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Referring to both juries now, don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. It's important that you not be in a position where you hear anybody else discussing this case or be exposed to anything, whether it's news coverage or anything else that might discuss this case or mention it in any way. So we'll be in recess and see you all back here at 1:30. The blue jury come into this jury room. The gold jury go next door. And when everyone is here, we'll resume at 1:30. Trial, the defendants are both in court with their lawyers, and the prosecution is represented, and all of the jurors, both juries are present. And we'll resume now with the testimony of the witness. Dr. Oziel, would you resume the witness stand, please? Would you state your name for us, please?
Yes, Dr. L. Jerome Oziel.
And you may continue your direct examination.
Thank you. Dr. Oziel, referring now to page 14 of the notes that you have.
Yes,
We're referring now to the November 2nd meeting, is that correct?
that's correct.
Did you have any discussion with them about whether or not they had killed their parents for money?
Yes.
Could you tell us what was said, please?
Right, I object to the question as to who was saying what. We had some-
All right, if you can clarify that, please.
Okay, do you know if one of the two defendants was saying this, or were they both saying it together? Was it a discussion? How did it occur?
Both brothers were talking about this. It was a discussion. And did you want me to go into the essential elements of the discussion?
What were the elements of the discussion?
They were concluding that they really didn't kill their parents for money, but out of the hatred that they had, in particular towards their father, and to be free from all of the abusive and onerous characteristics that the father had, dominating them, having them feel inadequate, inferior, exacting impossible standards, controlling their life, so on and so forth.
Some point after that, did you describe for them two different kinds of killings?
Yes, I did.
Could you tell the jury what you told them, please?
I described one pattern of killing and that related to certain characteristics. It had to do with being premeditated, involving sort of a plan, a job that needed to be accomplished, where the killing was in fact something that was like a job that had to get done and get accomplished. That feelings there either weren't many feelings about it, or whatever feelings that there were really didn't get in the way of it.
Did you contrast that kind of killing with another kind?
Yes, I did.
And what was the other kind that you described to the two defendants?
The other kind of killing that I described was a killing, if you will, out of intense emotion, something that occurred, a crime of passion type of killing, where there wasn't any premeditation and it wasn't a logical, rational plan to murder someone. It was just coming in, for example, to find something very emotional happening in one's life and grabbing the nearest knife or pistol or something, and in the heat of the moment shooting someone. So a lack of premeditation and something arising primarily out of emotion, not out of thought and rationale and plan and logic.
Did each of the two defendants acknowledge to you, after you described these two kinds of killings, which one was more applicable to their situation?
Yes, they did.
And as to the defendants, what did they indicate?
They indicated that the former pattern, the logical, rational, thought out pattern, was in fact the one that characterized their acts in relationship to the murder.
Referring now to page 17, Dr. Oziel. Did defendants have conversations with you about the notes that you were keeping?
Yes, they did.
And what was said?
I'm not seeing where on the page. Oh, you're
Bottom of the page.
okay. Yes. I had told them that I was keeping notes of these sessions, and also that if anything happened to me, if I mysteriously disappeared or was murdered or had a suspicious accident, that the notes would in fact be revealed publicly. And they were very concerned that what if somebody else killed me? What if there was something that looked like a suspicious accident, or someone murdered me or whatever, and even if it wasn't them, that these notes would nonetheless get released, and all of this would become public.
Now, did you have a further discussion with them about how the family looked to outsiders?
Yes.
Could you tell us about that, please?
Well, actually, it was less a discussion I had with them and more a discussion that they were having between the two of them, and I was listening to it.
And what did that discussion center on?
it centered on the extent to which the family looked perfect, like the ideal family to the outside world, but that in reality, that it was a disastrously negative family. That the marriage between the two parents was a very terrible marriage. That the mother and father had almost no relationship except a negative and emotionally abusive relationship, with the father being the abuser, and that the sons felt that they had nothing but distance towards and with respect to the father, criticism, rejection, humiliation, and that they also didn't really have a close or nurturing relationship with the mother, so that the family's reality had next to nothing to do with, and in fact was the opposite of, the perception of the family in the world.
Did they express to you any conflict that they felt inside about their opinion towards their father?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Did they ever tell you about both hating and loving their father?
Yes.
Okay, what was said about that?
Well, actually, they didn't talk about loving their father. That would be incorrect. They talked about idolizing their father, but I don't recall that either Erik or Lyle ever used the word love with respect to their father. I don't believe they did. They, I think, were more, in some ways, in awe of their father. They saw him as a very powerful person because he had been controlling them, for much of their life. And that's more what they described.
And did they say anything about how they felt about themselves for having accomplished his killing?
Yes, I think in relation to that, they felt like they had, innate, the fact that they were able to kill the father and complete this act, I think was almost a way of vindicating that they had a level of power themselves to be able to do it. That was their statement. They stated that they finally gotten to the place where they did something perfect.
Now, did Lyle Menendez, in the presence of his brother, indicate to you anything about getting down details of these sessions?
Yes, he did.
And what did he say?
He basically said that he wanted to make sure that all of the mitigating details of their background and whatever happened to them could be down, so that in the event there ever was a trial, that these mitigating factors could be brought out. And so he suggested that maybe in the future.
Did he suggest making notes?
No.
Did he suggest keeping? Did he want you to memorialize what had been said?
Yes, he did.
Now, later on, did Lyle give you a specific instance about how his father had been abusive towards him, involving his dating?
Yes.
Could you explain to the jury what was said?
Lyle mentioned that he had been dating someone that he had felt was a difficult person to date. It was an accomplishment. I think it was the Rose Festival Queen and a Billboard model, and that is two different women. And that his father even ridiculed and made fun of those two women that he was dating and called them both bimbos. And it was just an example on Lyle's part of how he was never able to please his father, no matter what he did, and that he didn't feel he ever could have pleased his father.
At the end of the session, did you have any conversation about where the defendants were going to go in the near future?
Yes.
And could you briefly tell us about that, please?
Well, they asked me where they could stay on the island of Kauai, that they were planning to vacation in Kauai, and that they planned to leave for about a week. And so that was a discussion that we had.
Dr. Oziel, during the course of your testimony, you've been making reference to notes, and I've been making reference to pages of those notes. Subsequent to November the 2nd, did you in fact memorialize what you had heard during the October 31st and November 2nd sessions?
Subsequent to the November 2nd session?
Yes.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And did you in fact make verbal notes on a cassette tape of what had been said to you on those two occasions?
That's correct.
And what you've been referring to, is that a transcript of those notes?
Yes, it is.
After you made that cassette, did you put it someplace?
Yes,
And where did you put it?
safety deposit box.
On March the 8th of 1990, did the police come to your house and eventually seize the tape from your safety deposit box?
Yes, they did.
And are you testifying here today under court order?
Yes, I am.
Objection, Your Honor. Everybody testifies under court order.
Objection is overruled, and don't argue the matter. Objection overruled. No, objection overruled.
I am testifying here under court order.
Thank you. I have nothing further at this time.
All right. Who wishes to proceed with cross-examination
I
first?
thought there was more direct, Your Honor. with
Did you want to do that first?
Yes, I believe that
Okay.
was the protocol.
All right, then that's what we'll do. How long do you think that'll take?
15 minutes.
All right. We will proceed with the hearing, or the testimony of the witness, and it will be with the Lyle Menendez jury. The Erik Menendez jury will be excused for the period of time of this testimony. And as I've indicated before, when these things happen, when one jury's in the courtroom and the other jury is not, you're instructed you must not speculate about what's going on in the courtroom. When you're away from the courtroom, you must make your decision based only on the evidence you hear in the courtroom while you're in the courtroom. All right, what we'll do is have the Erik Menendez jury take your break at this point and return at 2:30. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. And we'll resume at 2:30, and we'll resume as soon as you folks have left. So we'll see you back here at 2:30. Let's resume with the testimony of Dr. Oziel before the Lyle Menendez jury only.
Dr. Oziel, referring back to the October 31st session, just to briefly recap, you had some conversation with Lyle Menendez after he arrived at your office. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And now we're referring to page 7 of your notes, the first sentence, the first full sentence.
Yes.
Did Lyle Menendez express anything about how he felt about what had happened with you and his brother?
Yes, he did.
Okay, what did he say?
Well, he said that it was extremely stupid that Erik told me and had confessed all the details of the crime to me, and that there was someone who knew now, namely me, and that it wasn't a perfect murder anymore, and that it was a very, very big problem for him, that I knew, and that I was the only person who had this information. He was very fearful that I would tip the police or tip the newspapers. He didn't believe that there was any way for him to be safe now that I had this information. And basically made a number of statements that had to do with, it was a very big problem that I knew, and he'd have to figure out just what to do about this problem, and this wasn't good. And he was very menacing.
We have it established as to when this occurred, where it occurred,
I'm
and who
sorry,
else
Your
was
Honor.
present, please.
All right. Did this occur after Lyle Menendez had come to your office on October the 31st, which was the first session we've talked about in your testimony?
That's correct.
And at the time that Lyle Menendez said this to you, was anyone else in the room aside from yourself and Lyle Menendez?
Yes.
Who?
Erik Menendez.
And about how long after Lyle Menendez got to your office was it that he expressed the sentiments that you just relayed to the jury?
I would say that he began expressing threatening or menacing comments pretty soon, almost immediately after he walked into the room. And the menacing comments really were interspersed throughout the entire time that Lyle was in this first session with Erik.
And how much time did you actually spend in this session where Lyle Menendez was present?
I would estimate that it was about 25% of the total time. I believe that the total amount of time was approximately 4 hours.
So that would be approximately an hour.
Approximately an hour.
All right. Did he indicate to you anything about people looking over his shoulder?
Yes, he did.
Could you tell us what he said?
Yes. First, he asked me something about, or we discussed something about confidentiality, and after discussing that, what the limits of it were, he was pretty much dismissive of that and said, he was talking about how the fact he just didn't feel safe, and that there wasn't any way to feel safe. And I told him that I was feeling that he was specifically threatening and menacing to me. And he just glared at me and said that he didn't want to have anybody looking over his shoulder, and that's why he killed his parents to begin with. And I took that to mean that he was thinking of killing me.
All right, now, Dr. Oziel, at some point, did Lyle begin to leave the session?
Yes, he did.
At the time that he began to leave the session, had Erik Menendez already left?
Yes, he did.
At what point was it that Erik Menendez left? Was it during part of the conversation you've related to us?
Yes, as Lyle's comments got more and more menacing, and he was more and more threatening and unhappy. First of all, some of it was, I think, directed towards Erik for having told me to begin with, and then a lot of it was directed towards me. Erik was getting increasingly agitated and upset, and I think at one point he buried his head in his hands and he bolted out of the session, and ended up going downstairs.
All right, did you in fact, let me back up. At some point, Lyle began to leave the session, is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you express anything to him about what you wanted him to do?
Yes, I suggested and told them that I thought that the two of them should come back in the office and try to work through or talk about what had just gone on, that I was feeling extremely threatened and that I'd just been threatened, and that I didn't feel comfortable ending the session at this point because I felt that, that I was getting the clear message that that he at least was planning to do something to me. And he said he wasn't going to come back to the session. He wanted to talk to his little brother. And he said that basically he just wanted to go talk to his little brother before he decided whether or not he was going to talk to me anymore at all.
Okay, let me ask a question. Did you leave the building?
Yes, I did.
And when you left the building,
We did. I'm sorry.
Okay, were you in Lyle Menendez's company when you left the building?
Yes, he was leaving the office to go and be with Erik, and I was following after him, telling him that I really thought that we needed to come back and talk about this, that this was not a good way to leave the session.
Did you and he then go out onto the street?
That's correct.
And was somebody waiting out on the street?
Well, Erik was sitting in his Jeep, as I recall.
And at some point,
At the street.
all right, so he was in the Jeep on the street.
That's right.
Okay. Did you then have some concluding remarks with Lyle Menendez?
Yes.
Could you tell us about that, please?
Yes. After he told me that he wasn't sure that he wanted to talk to me anymore at all, I concluded that was extremely menacing. And he just shook my hand and said, good luck, Dr. Oziel, which I took again to be menacing and threatening.
What was the tone of voice he used with you when he said, good luck, Dr. Oziel? Was it friendly? Was it?
No, it was an ominous sort of good luck, Dr. Oziel, like a threatening good luck, Dr. Oziel. It definitely wasn't a friendly good luck, Dr. Oziel.
Did you then go back inside of your office?
Yes, I did.
Referring now to page 10 of your notes and moving ahead in time to the November 2nd session.
Correct.
After the beginning of the November 2nd session, did you indicate that you wanted to continue some sort of discourse or dialogue with Lyle Menendez in order to aid him?
Yes.
Okay, and what was his response to that?
Could you ask the question more specifically? I'm
Okay.
not sure what you're referring to.
I'm referring to the first full paragraph on the page,
On page
10.
10.
All right,
Okay.
did you tell Lyle Menendez that you wanted to work on something with him?
Yes. I'm
Okay.
sorry, I was looking at the wrong paragraph. Yes.
Okay, what did you tell him you wanted to work on?
I just told him that I wanted to work on whatever it was that caused he and Erik to murder their parents.
And what did he reply to that?
That he didn't think there was anything to work on because what caused him to commit the murders wasn't here anymore. They were both dead.
Moving ahead to page 12, Dr. Oziel. referring to the second full paragraph, did Lyle Menendez ever express to you an opinion on his part about how his father would have felt about what had happened?
Yes, he did.
Okay, could you tell us about that?
Yes, he said that he thought his father would have been proud of him for killing him.
And did he explain why he thought his father would have been proud?
Yes, first of all, he said that he knew that his father knew that he should have been killed. And he also said that he would have been proud of the good job that he did.
Referring now to page 14. The first full paragraph. Did you have a discussion with Lyle Menendez in the presence of his brother Erik Menendez about the question of an inheritance?
Yes.
Okay, could you tell us what was said during that discussion, please?
I asked if they felt guilty having millions of dollars from their parents' inheritance, and Lyle laughed and said no, but this wasn't done for the money. And they thought that if their father was in fact was alive, that he would have continued to double his net worth on a regular basis because he was actually on the ascendancy in terms of what he was earning.
Did he explain anything to you about the possibility of another will?
Yes, he did.
Okay, what was said by Lyle Menendez regarding that topic?
Well, he asked me if I'd heard about the will situation, and I recall that I said I hadn't. And he then told me that they had suspected that there was another will.
Okay, did he tell you who had suspected? Do you recall if he told you who suspected there
I think it was
was
his uncle that had suspected that that there was another will, which I think he related both Erik and Lyle had also suspected, which would have disinherited Lyle and Erik, and that he. What did you want me to?
Yeah, and what did he say anything that he'd done in relationship to the possibility of this will?
Yes.
What did he say?
We found a file called Will on the computer that they had at home that their mother had used, and Lyle arranged to have the entire hard disk erased so that none of the files could be brought up again. So there were only, I guess, zeros, and there weren't any actual letters that could be read. And this was to erase the possibility of discovering a will that would have disinherited Lyle and Erik, although Lyle did state that he didn't really believe that there was a new will that would have disinherited him.
Referring now to page 16 of your notes. And referring specifically to your notes, did Lyle express any concern to you at this November 2nd session about the possibility of what would happen with your notes if someone else read them?
Yes, he did.
What did he say?
He said that it was very important that the notes never get read. One of his cousins apparently had said that they would cut off the hands of anyone who they ever found that killed Jose and Kitty. And he also talked about the fact that it would be very embarrassing if it ever came out that they had killed their parents.
Now, lastly, referring to page 17 of your notes. And again, in reference to your keeping of the notes, did Lyle express anything about how he felt about the possibility of these notes getting read by someone else and how that might occur?
Yes.
Okay, what did he say?
Well, he was very concerned about someone else harming me and therefore having the notes come out. So he made a joke about us having to be very good friends, and that if somebody broke into my house and robbed me and began to shoot me, if I heard a shot behind me and saw the robber drop, I'd probably see Lyle behind saying, have a good night's sleep, Jerry. Words to that effect.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oziel. I have no further questions at this time.
All right, then we'll take a recess and resume at 2:30. Do council have anything you want to discuss before the cross-examination begins? All right, then we'll resume at 2:30, ladies and gentlemen. Don't discuss this case among yourselves or with anyone else, and don't let anyone discuss it in your presence. And we'll resume at 2:30. The jury of Lyle Menendez, if you would report back next door, and we'll check you in, and then the other jury will check in here, and then when you're all present, we'll have you come in. All right, we'll see you at 2:30. All right, all parties are present. The Juries are both present for both defendants, and we're ready to resume. Dr. Oziel, would you get back on the witness stand for us, please? All right. Cross-examination on behalf of the defendant, Erik Menendez.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, you testified that you have a PhD in psychology. Is that correct?
I believe I testified that I was a psychologist.
Do you have a PhD in psychology?
Yes, I do.
There are different types of psychology, are there not?
Yes, there are.
And there are different degrees in psychology. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And your degree is in clinical psychology. Yes?
That's correct.
And what is a clinical psychologist supposed to do?
A clinical psychologist is supposed to practice psychology with people who are seeking counseling for psychological or psychiatric purposes.
When you say people seeking counseling, are these frequently people seeking help?
I think that they would be people seeking help in general.
And would you say, in general, people who go to clinical psychologists seeking help are people who have some sort of problems with their life or emotional problems or both?
Yes, I would say that's ordinarily true.
And to your knowledge, do both adults, or do all of the following, adults and children and adolescents use the services of clinical psychologists?
I think that adults, children, adolescents, families, marriages, all sorts of people who are seeking counsel or help with emotional problems use clinical psychologists for those services.
And is it a basic tenet of the psychologist-patient relationship that what a person tells their psychologist is ordinarily private?
Ordinarily, what a patient tells a psychotherapist is private.
Is that yes?
I think I just said ordinarily it's private.
And in fact, isn't it a basic tenet of effective psychotherapy that the patient be confident that what they tell their psychologist is like what they tell their priest, confidential?
Objection argumentative.
Sustained.
Is it a basic tenet of therapeutic treatment that patients be told that what they tell their psychologists are like what they tell their priest, confidential?
No, I wouldn't ever make the analogy that what patients tell their psychotherapist is the equivalent of what they tell their priest.
Well, isn't it an accepted notion in clinical psychology that unless a patient believes what they're saying is confidential, it's unlikely that they will be totally forthcoming or trusting of their therapist so as to share their pain and their problems?
Objection calls for speculation.
Objection sustained.
In your training and education, were you trained and educated in informing your patients that they were free to tell you things because what they told you was confidential?
Objection irrelevant.
Overruled.
I was trained that that was something that I would tell patients with exceptions. And in fact, that's not, the answer is no. I was not trained to tell people that what they told me was confidential in an absolute sense.
So when your patients come to you, you tell them that what they tell you is not confidential. Is that what you're saying?
I don't believe I said that.
Well, do you tell your patients that what they tell you is not confidential?
No.
Are you free, generally speaking, to tell other people what your patients tell you in therapy?
Generally speaking, no.
And do you tell your patients, generally speaking, what they tell you is confidential?
I tell them specifically that what they tell me is confidential, except for the limitations to confidentiality in psychotherapy.
So you tell them generally it's confidential unless certain things are true or certain things happen.
Objection irrelevant as to general.
Overruled.
Could you repeat the question?
Could the reporter read it back, Your Honor?
Yes.
Question, so you tell them generally it's confidential unless certain things are true or certain things happen.
Unless certain things are true or certain things happen. Yes?
I would say that's true.
Now, apart from receiving a PhD in clinical psychology, did you also obtain certain specialty certificates or
Yes.
certifications?
Yes.
And are your specialty certifications in, number one, phobia and anxiety disorders?
I don't have a specialty certificate in phobia and anxiety disorders. I do specialize in treating phobia and anxiety disorder problems.
So you do not have a certification in phobia and anxiety disorders from the Phobia Society of America, or do you?
The answer would be that the Phobia Society of America is not, to the best of my recollection, a certifying agency or body. I am a member of the Phobia Society of America, and I do have the equivalent of something that is a document that one puts on the wall if one wishes, that represents that you're a member of the organization, but I don't know that it's a certifying body.
So it is not a certification. Is that right?
I don't know whether it is or it isn't. I don't recall.
Well, would it be proper to call it a certification?
I'm sorry?
Would it be proper to call it a certification?
I just don't remember now whether it is a certification or it isn't. It may say on the certificate or piece of parchment that it is a certification. I just don't recall it.
Did you list it on your curriculum vitae as a certification,
I may well have.
even though you don't know if it is?
Maybe it is. I'm just saying I don't recall now whether it is or it isn't at the moment.
Now, do you have a certification as a diplomate, as a board certified sex therapist from the American Board of Sexology?
Yes, I do.
And are you a certified sex therapist from the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists?
Yes,
And are you a certified,
Believe so.
Excuse me?
I believe so. Meaning I believe all these are up to date and so on and so forth. I don't know when that vita was, and I don't recall whether some of these certificates are current or not. So I don't know what the document is that you're reading from. And
At some point, did you have the certificates that I've just read?
that's correct.
And at some point, were you a certified sex educator from the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists?
That would be correct.
And at some point, were you a certified sexologist of the American College of Sexologists?
I believe so, yes.
And now, have I read to you all of the areas of which you are or were or believe you are or were certified?
I don't know. You're holding my vita, and I haven't probably looked at it for several years, so I
So
don't
you
recall.
need to see your vita to know what your specialties are?
No, I just don't recall whether I have certifications in areas that you didn't read off. I may or may not.
Your Honor, may the record reflect I'm holding a document entitled Curriculum Vitae 1988, named Jerome Oziel, PhD. Sir, why don't you look over this document? I haven't marked it yet. You see, that appears to be a copy of your CV as of 1988.
It says 1988 on it. I haven't seen this in a very long time. It does appear to be a copy of a CV, and I don't know when the CV was done.
Well, you did it, didn't you?
It was typed by someone other than myself. I just don't remember when it was done. I have no recollection. It does say 1988 on it, though.
Well, why don't you look it over and see if it appears to have all of your achievements and accomplishments as of 1988 contained therein?
Are you referring specifically to certification, or are you referring to the entire document?
Whatever it takes for you to convince yourself as to its date of preparation or accuracy as of a particular year.
In looking at the certification, it appears as if Those would be the fields that I was certified in as of 1988, to the best of my recollection.
Did I, by the way, read them off accurately?
I believe you did.
Is there anything else in the document that informs you as to when it was prepared?
Mm. Not really. Not that I can see, no.
It has a list, does it not, somewhere in the midst of publications? Is that correct? The articles and books that you either wrote or co-wrote or edited?
If you could go back to the podium, it would help so we could hear your voice.
I wanted to turn away. So does it have a list of publications that you either wrote or co-wrote or edited?
Yes, it does.
Back to the podium.
Does it have a listing of lectures and presentations of various kinds that you made?
Just one moment. Yes, it does.
And
Appears to.
do the dates of those presentations and publications seem to correlate that that's your CV as of 1988?
No, not really. The dates appear to stop in 1979. And so what I'm wondering is if maybe the year 1988 was typed on this, but the Vita is a very old Vita, because this is the presentations stop almost a full decade, if not longer than that, before the date on the Vita.
Well, who would have done that, Dr. Oziel? Who would have typed 1988 on a very old Vita of yours?
That could have been a secretary, anybody in my office who was who had a request to submit a Vita for some purpose.
Did you have an obligation to submit a Vita to counsel for Judalon Smith in a lawsuit between the two of you?
I don't recall that. I mean, it's possible that I did.
Now, when you look at the articles and the books and the lectures that are listed in that Vita, would it be fair to say that the vast majority of those things which you either wrote or spoke on deal with sex therapy?
I would say that the majority appear to deal with sex therapy. I don't know about the vast majority. I haven't taken the time to peruse it.
And in your clinical practice, do you advertise in various yellow pages and such?
Yes.
As of 1989, 1989 to 1990, did you advertise as a sex therapist?
No, I didn't advertise myself as a sex therapist. There probably was an advertisement saying something like sexual counseling services or marital counseling services.
Under your name or under the name of some organization of which you were a director?
I don't recall anything about me being a director of it. It was a long time ago, but I think it was just a DBA or a name of just a referral service number to call if people were interested in that kind of treatment.
Why don't we back up? In 1988, 89, 1990, you had offices, private offices, correct?
That's correct.
And they were on Bedford Drive in Beverly Hills.
That's correct.
And you had telephone numbers to that office.
That's correct.
And did you advertise in telephone directories under your name?
Yes, I believe so.
And did you, in those advertisements, hold yourself out to be a sex therapist or someone who was providing sex therapy or sexual counseling?
I believe so.
And do you believe that you also held yourself out as someone who treated phobias and obsessive compulsive disorders?
I don't recall whether I did or didn't hold myself out to be someone who treated obsessive compulsive disorders. The best of my recollection would be that probably that I did state that I treated phobia-related problems.
Now, to the best of your recollection, at any time from 1988 through 1990, did you ever hold yourself out as an expert in adolescent adjustment disorders?
hold myself out, do you mean, did I advertise myself?
Yes.
No.
Did you ever
Absolutely.
write an article on that topic?
No, I did not.
Did you ever lecture on that topic?
No, I did not.
Did you ever appear on television discussing that topic?
I certainly did not.
Well, you did appear on television discussing other topics, didn't you?
Yes, I believe I did.
In fact, you listed them in your vita, correct?
You can point that out to me.
Well, do you remember that that would be something that you would put in your CV, your television appearances?
I don't know. I haven't seen that in a number of years. You're refreshing my memory.
Do you have a current vita, Dr. Oziel?
I'm sure I do somewhere, but I haven't looked at it for some time.
Turning your attention to page 6 of this document under the heading Television Invited Interviews, does that have a list of television appearances that you made?
Yes, it does.
And can you tell me the date of the latest television appearance that appears on that CV?
It is 1988.
Why don't you keep reading?
Oh, there's one that says 1990.
So that does not appear to be an old, outdated CV. That appears to be a CV at least from some point in 1990, correct?
It looks like someone used it in 1990, but the information in the CV is not it's not an updated. I think somebody may have typed that onto an old Vita, which is what I think happened.
Okay, well, did you appear on 48 Hours on CBS television in 1990?
To be honest, I don't recall. I'm assuming I did.
Did you appear on cable VH1 in 1989?
I'm assuming I appeared on all of the things listed there. I just don't have vivid recollections of any particular TV shows I did or didn't appear on.
How about Fox 11, an AIDS special in 1988? Does that, do you remember that?
I remember having been part of an AIDS panel that was televised. So yes, that rings a bell.
That's yes?
Rings a bell. Yes.
How about on the CBS Network News in 1988? Do you recall making an appearance there?
I don't recall it.
How about Eye on LA in 1987? Do you recall that?
I think the best way to respond to this is without the specific titles of the segments or a description of what they were, I'm not going to have an easy time recalling any of them because they didn't have all that much import to me.
Well, just for clarification, this curriculum vitae, that's a Latin word, correct? Those are Latin words.
I think so.
An English word for this is a resume, right?
I think that a resume and a curriculum vitae are probably different.
Well, basically, though, this is supposed to be a compilation of all of your professional achievements, your degrees, your writings, your lectures, your positions, your appointments, all of that, right?
That's what a curriculum vitae normally does.
Okay, and that's what this one purports to do, correct?
As I said, I think it's out of date.
Yes, but it still purports to at least give some of it, even if it's out of date.
That's correct.
And you don't know if you have a more recent one.
I don't know.
Will you look and bring it with you tomorrow when you return?
I will look and see if I have a more recent one.
Okay, fine. However, included on this document, this resume or CV, are television appearances, correct?
That's correct.
And these are appearances on which somehow involved your professional career. I mean, you were speaking about things, I assume, associated with sex therapy or psychology or both.
That's correct.
Okay. Do you remember particularly an appearance on the John Davidson show in 1980 with a patient of yours?
No, I was never on John Davidson with a patient of mine. That's incorrect.
Do you remember being on that show? Do you remember, by the way, having a videotape of that show at one point?
I might have somewhere. I don't know.
And do you recall if that was a show, your appearance on that show had to do with phobias and how you had cured phobic behavior?
I don't think it said anything about me curing phobic behavior. I think the appearance was just one to discuss phobias, and it did not involve a patient of mine at all.
So you were there to discuss phobias. You did do that show.
I did discuss phobias.
Did you do that show?
On that show, yes.
Okay. And you also were on the Today Show in 1978. Was that to discuss phobias or sex therapy or both?
I have no recollection.
overruled.
I have no recollection of that at all.
Did you seek out television appearances?
No, I did not.
They sought you out, is that correct?
That would be correct.
Now,
I can explain that.
I don't think it needs explaining, thank you.
Okay.
On what, in what year, and if you know more closely, what date did you start a private practice?
I think I started a private practice the year that I was first licensed in the state of South Carolina, which would be, give me a moment here. I think 1972.
Okay. And when did you start a private practice in California?
I believe that would be 1974 approximately.
And did you start in Beverly Hills or did you get there later?
No, I believe I began in Beverly Hills.
Just to go back for a moment, this 48 Hours show that you appeared on in 1990, did that have anything to do with this case?
No, it had nothing to do with this case.
Was it before the search warrant was served on you?
The show was filmed before the search warrant was served on me.
But it was shown afterwards?
I don't recall.
So you believe you started your practice in Beverly Hills in 1974?
I believe so, approximately 1974.
And at that time, did you also have some kind of affiliation with the University of Southern California Medical Center, County General?
Yes, I did.
And did you, were you teaching in some capacity or training in some capacity in sex therapy at County General?
Among many other areas, yes, I was also teaching and training in sex therapy, but only among other areas.
And at some point, did your teaching at USC end? Or do you still do that?
No, up until several years ago, I was still on faculty at USC. It did end only a couple of years ago. I can explain that process.
Why don't you
Okay.
just wait for a question? It makes it
Okay.
more organized.
All right.
In 1988, you've already indicated you first came in contact with the Menendez family. Is that right?
I believe so.
And, well, you're not sure?
I haven't seen my records, as you know, Ms. Anderson, for approximately 4 years. I haven't had them. So I'm assuming that 1988 is about right. If you'd care to provide me with my, with the records, I probably could save some time.
Well, first let's establish the state of your memory. I honestly do not remember the year in which you first met the Menendez family. Is that what you're telling me?
No, I believe it was 1988, but we've been talking about a lot of dates, and I was just thinking that it might save some time for me to have my own patient records here.
So you believe it was 1988, and do you recall which members of the Menendez family you came into contact with first?
To the best of my recollection, the answer would be, I believe so.
You believe you do remember who?
I believe I do.
And who do you believe it was that you first came into contact with from this family?
I believe that I first came into contact with Kitty and Jose Menendez.
And do you believe that it was after that that you first came into contact with Erik Menendez?
I don't have a recollection that's clear about whether I talked with Erik later in that session or whether I contacted or talked with Erik after the first full session with the Menendezes.
Dr. Oziel, you've indicated in response to questions from Mrs. Bozanich that on March 8th, the Beverly Hills Police went to the safe deposit box and removed some materials from it. Recall that?
Yes, I do.
And did they also remove some things from your home before going to the safe deposit box?
Yes, it did.
And among the things that were removed from your home, did they remove ledgers that contained the account records of the Menendez family?
Yes, I believe they did.
Your Honor, I would like to mark these documents. There are 4 pages of yellow accounting style papers. I propose to mark them with one number and A, B, C, D the pages.
That's fine. 97 A, B, C, and D.
Let me just make sure they're in chronological order before I submark them. Of course not.
May I correct something or
Your Honor, there's no question pending.
Is this a correction of an answer you've given to a question that's been asked?
I believe it is, and maybe I can ask the court whether it is or it isn't. It just relates to, she asked me about certification. She didn't ask me about licensure. And
Your Honor, there's no
Sure.
question pending.
Somebody might ask that, so you can wait for them to ask questions.
okay.
Okay, let me just make sure I have these in order, Your Honor. They're written on both sides. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Sir, showing you this 4-page document marked collectively 97, why don't you take a look at 97A for a moment and see if that reacquaints you with your acquaintance with the Menendez family.
Yes, but the first date doesn't have any notation.
Why don't you just look at it for a minute, and I can ask you some questions.
Oh, okay.
Now, the first date on that sheet is September 30th, 1988, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you don't recall now who you saw on that day?
Well, I do recall that I saw Mr. and Mrs. Kitty and Jose Menendez. I don't recall whether Erik was any part of that session or not.
Okay. Now, why don't you look down from there? Is the next date October 4th, 1988?
That's correct.
And are there 2 entries for October 4th, 1988?
Yes, there are.
And is one of them for Mr. and Mrs. Menendez?
That's correct.
And is the other one for Erik?
That's correct.
And if you look down another line, do you see October 5th, 1988?
I do.
And does that indicate an entry for a session with Lyle Menendez?
Yes, it does.
Now, these ledger cards that I've put in front of you, 97A through D, contain only entries for appointments with members of the Menendez family, no other patients. Is that correct?
To the best of my knowledge.
Well, if you had any doubt, why don't you let us know?
To the best of my knowledge, as I peruse this, I only see entries for the Menendez family, or Erik and Lyle, and then the couple coming in for consultation.
Well, we're talking about a nuclear family of 4 people, Mr., Mrs., Erik, and Lyle, correct?
We're talking about a nuclear family, but I wasn't treating all 4 members of the family.
I didn't ask you that, did I?
All
All right, I asked you if those ledgers contain only appointment information for the 4 members of the Menendez nuclear family. And you said you weren't sure, so I let you look at it. So now, are you sure that's only the ledgers for the Menendez family contacts?
That's all that I saw in perusing it.
All right, the objection is overruled. Your next question, please.
Now, in 1988, when you first met the Menendez family, did you tell any or all of them that your license was on probation at that time?
I don't recall having told them that.
And in 1989, in October, specifically October 31st, when you had Erik and Lyle in your office, did you tell either of them at that time that your license was on probation?
I don't believe I did.
And it was still on probation, was it not, at the time that you placed the tape, the notes, the transcribed notes of which you've been using here, in the safe deposit box from whence the police retrieved it, correct?
I believe so.
In fact, it was on probation until 91, is that right?
Best of my recollection.
Now, I want to talk generally for a moment, sir, about some of your practices in therapy. Foundational, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Thank you. When a patient comes to you and you have a psychotherapeutic session with them, ordinarily, do you write something about that session at some point?
For most sessions, yes, not for all sessions. It's a very individualized situation depending upon what's happening with the patient.
Let's talk, though, just for the moment about your general practice, particularly with a new patient. Would you make some effort following, a session to make some form of notes of what transpired?
Generally, yes, I would.
And is there a formal, is there a format, a formal psychotherapeutic note format that you follow ordinarily?
No.
Are there something that are called, or that you would call, technical psychotherapeutic notes?
No, I've never used that phrase.
So these notes are no different than what you jot down, say if you were on the phone with a friend and you wanted to remember a few things that they said?
I don't believe I said that.
Well, are they of some type of format or structure that you regularly use?
The format just has to do with summarizing the content of the session. And it isn't a rigid structure or rigid format, and the notes are highly variable. They depend very much on the nature of the consultation and how much new information is contained in it, so on and so forth.
Why do you make notes?
You make notes to have, number one, some record, but also I make notes to have a better ease with which to recall what transpired in the session subsequently.
Well, you said first one reason was to make a record. What type of record?
Just a record that the visit took place, and for particularly important issues, to make a record of what those issues were and what was discussed, to be able to track what's happening in the course of the therapy.
Okay, when you say issues, whose issues? Yours or the patient's or both?
Ordinarily, the patient's issues.
Okay, a patient comes to you, as we've established, usually seeking help, seeking counseling. They have a problem, right?
That's correct.
And isn't it the duty and isn't it a necessity, in fact, in order to give therapy, that a therapist attempt to figure out what the problem is, or at least what the patient thinks the problem is?
I think both of those would be an important thing to do.
And is the purpose of note-taking in this early stage so that you can accurately record what issues or problems the patient is presenting to you, this new person you've never seen before?
That would be one purpose of note-taking.
Now, is another purpose of note-taking, let me strike that, is it your practice in making patient notes to also indicate in notes some assessment of the patient?
I don't know what you mean by assessment. You'll have to tell me.
You don't know the terminology assessment?
I don't know what you mean when you say assessment.
Well, what does it mean in the psychological sense?
The word assessment doesn't have any one meaning psychologically. has multiple meanings.
Well, let's talk about then some sort of evaluation on the therapist's part, however tentative from a first meeting. Do you tend to do that, make some sort of evaluation and make note of it?
At some point, I generally do have an evaluation and make a note of what the evaluation is, and that often includes a diagnosis.
So diagnosis is another thing that you do.
That's correct.
And do you also put in these notes some plan for therapy? Like, you got this person, here's the problem as they see it, here's how you assess it or evaluate it or diagnose it, and then don't you write, now here's what I'm going to try to do.
Generally, that happens, yes.
Now, this record that you're making, is this for your purpose or your benefit, or is it for the patients, or both?
Well, it really serves the patient's benefit ultimately, and it's for my purpose in assessing and working with the patient.
Now, are these notes also in the way that you deal with them? Are you trying to make a record adequate so that if, for example, you should become ill or disabled or leave town or retire, or the patient leaves town, that these notes can be taken and given to a new therapist, and that therapist can understand where the patient has been psychologically, what treatment they've been subjected to, how they've progressed, that sort of thing. Something that someone else can look over and get some meaning from.
That would be one benefit or one purpose to making notes.
And is there a legal component to making notes?
Say a legal component. Can you be more specific?
Well, is there, or are notes in a sense of potentially a form of protection for therapists from civil liability, say for such things as malpractice and wrongful death, things like that?
They could be.
And do you have that in mind when you write notes, potential civil liability?
Not ordinarily, no.
Sometimes,
Rarely.
but it happens.
Once or twice.
And are notes also made so that you can remember what the patient told you last week? So when they come in next week, you don't misquote someone else's history to them or seem ignorant or uninterested or uncaring or unconcerned by not remembering what they've told you.
Sure, that would be a reason for making notes as well.
Now, I'd like to show you, before I do that, let me ask you if in 1988, it was your standard practice to maintain notes of sessions with your patients as a general practice.
I believe that it was.
Was the same true in 1989?
I believe that it was.
And was the same true in 1990?
I believe that it was.
Now, when you started your private practice in Beverly Hills in 1974, did you have office hours and see patients 5 days a week or something less than that?
Something less than that.
Have you ever had a 5-day-a-week practice in the sense that you saw private patients at your office 5 days a week?
I believe so.
And was that true in 1988, 89, and 90?
I don't recall. Like I said, I haven't seen those records for numerous years.
Do you have a private clinical practice now?
Yes, I do.
Do you see patients now?
Yes, I do.
And do you see patients 5 days a week?
No, I do not.
How many days a week do you see patients now?
Oh, approximately 2.5 days a week.
And was that true as well in last year, in 1992?
I don't recall.
Do you recall 91?
No, I don't.
Okay. Let me, if I might approach Your Honor, these are...
Can I ask counsel to approach the sidebar?
Your Honor, I have two appointment style books. I'd like to mark the one that's marked 1989, Exhibit 98. And the one that's marked week at a glance and inside says 1990, Exhibit 99.
All right.
Now, Dr. Oziel, here's what I propose to do. First of all, I just want you to identify these as your appointment books for the years 1989 and 1990. And if you just glance through them to assure yourself that that's what they are, then I'm going to give you an opportunity to look at them a little more carefully.
That's what they look like they are.
Okay. Now, what I'd ask you to do, first of all, those books appear to have the names of patients in them, and you understand that I'm not going to be eliciting from you the names of any of those patients in that book. You do understand that, correct?
I do.
All right. What I would ask you to do, though, in order for me to continue with questions about the nature of your practice, is for you to look at the 89 book, first of all, in order to allow you to answer my question concerning how many days a week did you see patients in your clinical practice. So take whatever time you need to refamiliarize yourself with that book.
Okay.
All right, are you able now to answer the question as to how many days a week were you seeing patients in your practice in 1989?
Appears to be 3 days.
And now if you would, switch over to the 1990 book, which I believe only contains 3 months of entries. Actually, less than that.
That's correct.
And just see for the months of January, February, and for the early part of March, whether your frequency of seeing patients remain the same or changed.
It appears to have, it's approximately the same, so far as I can tell.
I believe what the 1989 book shows is that you saw patients on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. Is that right?
That's what it appears to be for the bulk of the book.
And in 1990, for the months of January, February, and that little bit of March that's there before the police sees that.
Excuse me, I need to make a correction. I'm seeing that there are weeks here where where there are definitely 4 days worth of patients. So, I mean, it isn't always the case that I saw people 3 days a week. I'm looking
You're
at it.
talking about when you say here, which book are you looking at, 89 or 9?
No, I'm looking at 1989.
Okay, now look at 1990.
Okay, 1990.
There are some days, let me see if I understand what you just said. There are some days in 1989 when you would see 1 or 2 patients on a 4th day, or you'd have some phone therapy with someone on a 4th day. Is that right?
It looks like I definitely am seeing people 4 days a week in 1990.
In 1990?
Yes.
Yes, you're seeing people in 1990, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday afternoons, and Friday. Is that what it looks like?
That's what it appears to be for the first 3 months. Mm-hmm.
But in 89, the Thursday afternoon was not a regular 5 to 7 patient booking as it is in 1990. Isn't that true?
It looks to be more irregular in 1989. Correct? There's some days that it's more booked and some days it's not.
Now, we've heard, or I suppose I've heard, and perhaps you've heard about what's called the 50-minute hour. Do you know what that refers to with respect to psychiatrists?
I heard that phrase used.
Okay, and what does that refer to, the 50-minute hour?
Well, that classically, a lot of psychotherapists see patients for 50 minutes, and sometimes it's for more than 50 minutes, sometimes it's for less than 50 minutes, but that psychiatrists and or psychologists or psychotherapists generally don't see people for a full 60 minutes.
So the 50-minute hour, does that mean that if you book an hour of a psychiatrist or psychologist's time,
you get 50 minutes with him and then he gets 10 minutes to do whatever, but you're basically paying for that hour. Isn't that what the 50-minute hour means?
I'd be speculating about what the 50-minute hour means. If you want me to speculate, yes, I think that's what it means.
Okay, well, don't speculate if you don't know what it means. It's okay to say, I don't know.
I don't use that term, so I don't know what other people mean by it.
You don't use that term because it's true, is it not, Dr. Oziel, that you bill for 45-minute sessions?
That's correct.
And in 1989 and 1990, you billed $150 for each 45-minute session. Is that correct?
Probably correct. That would
You don't know?
No, that would have been I think that would have been my billing rate.
Well, has it gone up?
Yes, but I think that was the billing rate at that period of time.
So at this time, you charge more than $150 for 45 minutes. Is that right?
Right.
But in 1989 and 1990, if you have any doubt, you have the ledger sheets in front of you.
I believe that's true.
And in looking over, let me approach, if I can, and look at the appointment book with you. We have 89. Okay.
Yes, yes. Both council members.
I've just picked a random day, and if it doesn't inform you enough, you can turn to any other day you want. But it does appear that most of the appointments are set at 45-minute intervals, does it not?
That's what it appears to be, yeah.
And some patients apparently have like a double session, an hour and a half continuously, and then a new patient shows up, correct?
That occurs sometimes, yes.
And the new patient can be with you for 45 minutes, and then another patient shows up, correct?
That sometimes happens.
All right. Now, this is your appointment book, which I believe is not in your handwriting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You had an employee of some sort who did the writing in these books.
That's correct. None of my writing is in the books.
But I would like you to search your memory to see if what is displayed on those days, the booking of people 45 minutes apart, is in fact what you were experiencing in your office. Every 45 minutes, somebody else showed up.
Well, that wouldn't be accurate. Sometimes there are long gaps between seeing people. Sometimes I took a half an hour break. It's true that I saw people for 45-minute sessions, but it definitely isn't true that I saw people 45 minutes, each 45 minutes a new person came in. That would be an inaccurate statement.
Well, let's go back to the book. I think I just showed you a day when that, at least for part of the day, would be true. They booked 45 minutes apart. So sometimes there's a break somewhere in the day, but some days people are just booked one right after another, 45 minutes apart, particularly the morning session.
I should mention as clarification that I don't always see people for 45 minutes. Some people I see for half hours. They're not all 45-minute sessions. So the fact that people are booked into 45-minute time periods does not mean that I saw each one of these people for 45 minutes. It could mean that I saw them for 20 minutes or for a half hour or for anything, or for that matter, an hour and a half.
Ordinarily, however, Dr. Oziel, in looking through those books, I've noticed, and perhaps you will notice if you will look through them, that when
We asked the question.
Sorry. Isn't it true that if someone's there for less than a full session, it's marked on that book as half of a session or half an hour? But when it's just the name, it indicates a 45-minute regular session.
I don't know, meaning I don't know because I didn't keep this appointment book. And as a matter of fact, this appointment book was not used by me for clinical purposes at all. This appointment book was actually kept in my office, and until this was seized, I don't know that I even saw this. This was an office copy for office purposes of keeping track of who is coming in. And so I would have no idea whether this corresponded to how long I actually saw somebody or even the accuracy of it, except insofar as I would certainly hope that it was accurate.
Wasn't that the book from which the billings were compiled?
I also don't know that. I mean,
You don't know. You don't know what was used to bill people $150 for every 45 minutes. You don't know what was used to do that.
I think I said, I don't know if this was the book that was used.
Okay, but what I'm asking you is, looking on the face of, and you can point to any page that you think disputes what I'm saying, but in looking on the face of those pages, it appears that appointments are booked with named patients at 45-minute intervals.
It does appear that way in this book.
And weren't those books seized pursuant to search warrant from your home?
Yes, they were.
And that's where they were kept all the time, in your home,
In a business office within my home, yes.
to which you were permitted entry.
That's correct.
In fact, it was your office.
No, it wasn't my office. It was a business office.
Whose business?
Well, it was the professional practice, but it wasn't my office in the sense that I used it on a daily basis to be using it as an office.
It's in your house, and it's the office of your professional practice. Is that what you mean?
Right.
It's your practice, so it's your office, right?
Okay. That's the sense in which you mean it.
And wasn't it, in fact, an appointment book, if not that particular one maintained in a similar way that is used to send bills to these people?
And I don't know whether this appointment book was used to send bills to people or not.
Well, do you know what kind of appointment book was used to send bills to people?
Frankly, I'm not sure.
And who did the billing?
The secretaries that were employed at the time, and in addition to that, my wife sometimes acts as sort of an overall office manager.
So do you think your wife would know
I,
which book was used for the billing?
she might.
Who was the secretary that you had who did the billing in 1989?
I don't recall. I'm not sure.
Well, who are the choices?
I think that actually, I'm not sure. I'm not sure which person it was. And I don't know whose writing this is, but I think my wife would know. I can ask her.
Well, why don't we see do you know somebody named Sandy?
Yes.
Was she your secretary for a long time?
Yes, she was.
Did she do billing?
She did.
Did she work for you in 1989?
I don't recall if she did or didn't. I don't know when she stopped
Does she
working.
work for you now?
She does not.
What's her full name?
Her name is Sandy Lambeck.
Lambeck?
Yes.
And do you know who was your secretary after Sandy?
No, I do not.
Do you know who your secretary is now?
Actually, I think her name is Dolores.
And does Dolores come to your home where your office is?
The home is the office is in an adjoining room to the home, and yes, she does.
Did Sandy Lambeck work for you in September of 1990?
She may have. She probably did.
Well, I thought you just told us she didn't work for you in 1989.
Well, you just refreshed my memory. We've had a number of different secretaries.
I refreshed your memory because I'm holding a document that you may think may contradict you. Is that what you're saying?
No, I didn't even know you were holding a document.
Did you hold a press conference in September of 1990 at which you submitted a document signed by Sandy Lambeck?
I believe I did.
And did this document signed by Sandy Lambeck refer to things that had occurred with respect to a woman named Judalon Rose Smith?
Yes, it did.
And was Judalon Rose Smith someone that you met in 1989?
Yes, she was.
And in this document was Sandy Lambeck asserting that she worked for you and had personal knowledge of certain matters that transpired between you and Judalon Smith in 1989?
I believe so. I haven't seen that for a couple of years either. So.
And if that were true, would that indicate to you that Sandy Lambeck was your secretary in 1989? Would it
Yes.
not?
Mm-hmm. That's correct. Yes, that looks familiar.
And does that appear to be the signature or a copy of the signature of your secretary, Sandy Lambeck?
Appears to be.
And does that appear to be a document signed in September of 1990?
It appears to be.
And is it referring in fact to things that transpired in 1989?
I don't recall when some of these things transpired, but I believe they probably would have been in 1989.
And by this document, Ms. Lembeck is basically saying she's your secretary.
Objection sustained.
At that same press conference on September 13th, 1990, didn't you, in fact, tell the media that you had in your possession a declaration from your secretary?
I don't recall, but if you have something stating I did, I probably did.
Now let's get back to the appointment books.
Okay.
Do you believe that you were making notes in 1989 of patient sessions?
I believe I was.
And what was your standard practice for making notes? When would you do it? In what form would you do it? And then what would you do with them?
Okay. I would make notes, usually after sessions. Sometimes I make notes in groupings, meaning I'll summarize.
Go ahead. I just did, for one thing, the mic pops if you get too close.
Okay.
You said you would make notes after sessions, sometimes in groupings.
Groupings, meaning I would summarize what's transpired over the past month with a given patient, something of that nature. And that would be my practice.
Okay, let's start with the first thing. You said you would make notes after the sessions. Does that mean that after every 45-minute session, before the next patient shows up, you'd write something down?
No, not always. Very often at the end of the day, I would make notes summarizing what had happened with the people that I saw that day, most particularly with people whose issues warranted more exploration, more note-taking.
All right, well, let's see if I understand now. Let's say a patient comes in at 8 o'clock in the morning. You do have some appointments even that early in 1989, do you not?
I don't know. I'd have to look to see, but it appears that most days I don't have people that early.
Well, if you want, I can show you, but let's say 9 o'clock then.
Okay.
Someone comes in at 9 o'clock, they have issues that are worth writing about. You don't write anything while the people are there. Is that right?
That's correct.
This is
Well,
not.
no, that wouldn't be correct. I sometimes write things while they're there. I just don't generally take all the notes of the session while the person is in session with me.
Well, I want to find out about your general practice. Generally, is it your practice when your patients are there with you that you're making any kind of notes in their presence?
It's not possible to generalize like that. With some people I do and some people I don't. It depends on very much on what's happening and what the nature of the problem is.
Okay, so you're now testifying that there are patients with whom you actually write things down during the course of sessions. Are we clear that you are saying that?
That's correct.
And are there other patients where you don't ever write anything down during the course of the session?
There probably are.
Well, do you know or are you guessing?
Well, I think that there are. I think I can recall some people where I don't write things down during the course of the session.
And with the people where you, well, either one, I think you've indicated that you would do more writing, whether you took some notes down during the session or not, you would do more writing after the session.
Usually.
Well, isn't that how you answered 4 questions back? When I asked you about your general practice, you say you make notes after sessions, sometimes in groupings to summarize the past month. Didn't you say that?
I think I did, yes.
Yes, and you didn't say, I make notes during the sessions and after. You just said after, right?
Well, I think I corrected it.
All right, so now we're corrected that you make notes during, and do you always add to those notes after?
No, sometimes I don't add to the notes at all.
So with some patients, you make complete notes during the session.
I make as many notes as I feel are necessary for that session during the session sometimes.
And is that the majority of your patients?
I don't know how to, I think I'd be completely speculating and guessing about that. I don't know if it's a majority or not a majority.
Was this a standard practice with respect to certain patients? For example, you know, I'll make up names, okay? John Doe. Let's assume you have a patient named John Doe.
would you decide based on, whatever John Doe's problem is or how you relate to John Doe or what John Doe's therapy is all about, that John Doe is a patient whose notes you choose to make during the session?
No, it really didn't work like that and doesn't work like that.
Well, would it be periodic then? With some patients, sometimes you'd make notes during the sessions, but with those same patients, other times you'd only make notes after.
That would probably be the way that it happened more often.
Okay, so the way that happened more often would be that you don't have a general pattern patient by patient. Is that what you're saying?
I would say that with some frequency, I take notes during sessions, and most particularly take notes when something critical is happening as a way of memorializing an insight or a particular issue that I want to make sure that I get down. And if nothing that critical is happening, or if the notes would have to be very elaborate, usually I do those notes after the sessions.
Do you think your sessions with Erik and Lyle Menendez on October 31st were critical?
Yes, I do.
How about the session on November 2nd? Was that critical?
Yes, it was.
You didn't make any notes whatsoever during those sessions. Isn't that true?
I certainly did not.
Now, on days that would be very busy, where you'd see a lot of patients, I take it that most of your non-intra-session notes would be made at the end of the day. Is that right? Or the next day, or the day after that?
Usually.
Is that usually true?
Usually.
And I take it when we're talking about notes generally in your practice, we're talking about something you write, correct?
Usually.
And did you use a word processor or a computer, or did you do your notes in handwriting?
No, usually did my notes in handwriting.
And in what form were these notes on a particular form or a particular kind of paper or in a particular book?
No, actually, the notes would be just jotted down on a kind of paper, lined paper, whatever, but they're not in a particular kind of form or book.
Let's say you have 15 patients, hypothetically, okay? Do you have file folders for each of them in which you put their notes?
Yes.
And are these like manila folders, or are they 3-ring binders, or are they something else altogether?
No, they would be like a manila folder.
And would the manila folder have the name of the patient and other information?
That's correct.
And when you write these notes, did you use the same kind of paper for all the, do you have a certain kind of paper you like to use for note taking?
I wouldn't say there's any one kind of paper that I use, no.
All right, well, do you use scrap paper, or do you use some form of,
Usually it's lined paper, but sometimes it's on notepad paper that's in my office. And so it's not a standard kind of paper that I use each time for note taking.
Okay, so it's any kind of lined notepad that winds up in your, that someone's buying for your practice you use. Is that right?
Sometimes it's not even lined. Sometimes it's notepad paper that I make notes on in my office and put those.
But then after you make them, whether it's during a session or after a session or several days or a month later, you then put them in the patient file, correct?
Yes, in a note file.
In a what?
Note file.
A note file. And is that a separate thing than the billing file?
Yes, it is.
And do you put them in the note file in any particular order?
I believe that they're alphabetical.
The patients are alphabetical.
Right.
What about the notes, though? The notes.
Oh, I don't really know whether they're in any particular order or not. I mean, they're dated.
Okay, you make sure you date each one, correct?
The notes are dated.
Now, did you see members of the Menendez family periodically over much of the course of the period between September 30th, 1988 and August 20th, 1989.
I would say that would be a true statement. But members of the family would imply that I saw Mr. and Mrs. or Jose and Kitty Menendez with some frequency, which I did not.
I don't remember saying anything about frequency. I said periodically. Now, is the statement still true?
Periodically,
Yes?
yes.
And on a date close in proximity to and after August 20th, 1989, did you learn of the killings of Jose and Kitty Menendez?
I believe I did.
And did you make contact with one or both of the Menendez children after hearing that?
Yes, I did.
And did you go to where they were staying with their family and visit with them?
I wouldn't characterize it that way.
Well, did you go to where they were?
I had sessions with them where they
Your
were.
Honor, I'd move to strike the answer. It is not responsive. If I'm wrong, say no.
All right. You addressing that to me? If
No,
you're wrong,
sir.
say no.
No, you say, when you feel no, you do worse than say no. I'm
Okay.
talking to the witness. I realize I should have asked the court to do that.
All right. Well, let's re-ask the question then. The objection is sustained. The answer is stricken. Why don't you ask
Okay.
the question again?
Let's break it into pieces. Did you reach out and contact them, either Erik or Lyle or both?
Yes, I did.
And at some point, did you go to the place where they were staying?
Are you referring to the Bel Air Hotel?
Yes, I am.
Yes, I did.
And when you went to the Bel Air Hotel, were members of their family there with them?
There were members of their family in addition to a number of other people that were there with
But
them.
the question was, were there members of family?
Yes, there were.
Okay. Can you answer that question? Yes. Is that the answer?
I think he has answered the question.
All right. Now, were there other people there besides members of their family?
Yes, there were.
And do you recall what was the first date upon which you went to the Bel Air Hotel and saw the Menendez brothers and other people?
No, I did not.
Do you have the ledger card there?
I do have the ledger cards here.
Why don't you look at it for dates after August 20th, 1989? And see
Okay.
if that will refresh your memory as to when you went to the Bel Air Hotel.
Okay. I see August 23rd, 24th, and 25th.
Now, I asked, the question is, do you recall the first date upon which you went to the Bel Air Hotel and saw Erik and Lyle and these other people?
It appears to be August 23rd.
Okay.
I don't recall it. It appears to be.
And did you go back on the 24th?
Yes, it appears that I did.
And what about the 25th?
I wouldn't know whether the 25th was was at the Bel Air Hotel or whether it was in my office. I don't know that.
You see, you can't tell, but you show contacts on the 23rd, the 24th, and the 25th.
Yes, and by the way, I should clarify
Is
that
that yes?
I think I gave an incorrect answer. I think I
Well,
should.
All right, you
gonna
can
go
correct
back.
your answer.
Okay. You said, does this tell you when you went to the Bel Air Hotel? All the ledger card tells me is that I saw them for sessions that I would assume must have been at the Bel Air Hotel because of how many sessions they were billed for, but I don't know that these sessions were at the Bel Air Hotel.
So you were having private therapy sessions with them at the Bel Air Hotel? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying I was consulting with them at their request at the Bel Air Hotel and basically doing what I thought was therapeutic with them. That's correct.
Okay, well, let's break that down. Are these private therapeutic sessions or are they just public visiting? Which is it?
No, I was specifically
No
requested.
is not responsive. Let's start
Okay.
over. Is this private therapeutic session so that you are speaking to one or both of them in confidentiality? That's the first question.
The answer is no, they were not private therapeutic sessions.
Okay, so they're not.
No, they were not.
But you bill them for them at the same rate that you charge for private therapeutic sessions, $150 for every 45 minutes. Is that right?
That's my custom.
But that's what you did here.
Yes, it is.
And in fact, on August 24th, you billed them $1,300. Is that correct?
That's correct. That reflects the time I spent with him.
And this is after you called with your condolences. Is that right?
No, that's not right.
You didn't call with your condolences?
No, I did not.
You didn't feel badly?
I didn't say that. Ms. Abramson, you know that.
What I know, Dr. Oziel, is not.
Counsel, let's not argue with the witness.
Did you
Ask
call
your
with your
next question.
condolences or express your feelings of sentiment, support to them?
I'm sure that in the first couple of minutes or minute of interaction, I did, and I'm also sure in my memory that what I did immediately thereafter was ask them if, in fact, ask Erik, as I recall, if in fact he wanted me to be there as a person, as his therapist, to help him. And the response that I got was, yes, he did. And the next question was, did he want to come into my
Your
office?
Honor, I think now we're completely non-responsive to the last question.
Objection overruled. Why don't you finish the answer?
Okay. I asked if he wanted to come to my office, and he said, no, he couldn't come to my office, and neither could Lyle, because they were fearful of their lives that the mafia
Your Honor,
was.
I'd move to strike this as totally non-responsive.
All right, the objection is overruled. The answer will stand up to the point where the reference is as to the fact that Erik Menendez, or to the testimony of the witness that Erik said that he couldn't go to the office, as to why that is stricken as non-responsive. You may ask your next question.
All right, Dr. Oziel, now let's get back to the billing for these days. You call your time with Erik and Lyle and the family sessions, do you not?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Look at the ledger, would you please, for August 24th, 1989?
That's correct. I call them sessions.
And a session.
Well, I didn't call them sessions. That's incorrect. Whoever wrote this ledger card called them sessions.
Who did write this ledger card?
It probably was the secretary. It definitely wasn't me.
The secretary or your secretary?
Oh, it would have been my secretary.
All right, your secretary. And your secretary uses the word session. Does she have your authorization and instruction to use that word?
No, I don't necessarily know that she had any authorization or instruction to use any particular word. I probably just told her the total amount of time that I spent with Erik and Lyle, and she probably just broke it down into billing segments.
Strike this as speculation and not responsive.
All right, the objection is sustained. If you can answer a question yes or no, it would help rather than going into an explanation, which can be done by counsel and asking a follow-up question if they choose to do that.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, sir, a session in your practice is a block of time 45 minutes long, correct?
That's correct.
And you bill, do you not, $150 per session, correct?
At that time, that was correct.
And so when your secretary notes on the ledger sessions, that's a unit of billing, correct?
That's how she broke that down. That's correct.
And for August 24th, the units, there were 8 units or sessions plus half an hour, correct?
It looks like that's what it says.
And the amount of money, does that seem consistent with 8 45-minute sessions plus half an hour?
Approximately.
Now, on 8/23, the ledger shows 3 sessions and it says consult. Now, does that lead you to believe that this is other than sessions in your office?
I have no idea why this person wrote down consult or sessions. I really don't.
Let's take a look at 8/26. Is there an entry for that date?
Yes, there is.
And that says 4 sessions, correct?
That's correct.
Was there a memorial service for Mr. and Mrs. Menendez here in Los Angeles?
Yes, there was.
Do you know what day it was on?
I don't know what day it was on.
Did you attend?
Yes, I did.
Did you bill for it?
If that's the day that it was held, yes, I did.
Well, I don't know if that's the date it was held, but did you instruct your secretary to bill for your attendance at the memorial service?
I don't think that the 4 sessions were at the memorial service at all. I think they were.
I don't
No.
think that's what I asked.
No,
you.
I didn't.
I'm asking you this. Do you recall instructing your secretary or bookkeeper or whoever makes these things to bill for the time you spent attending the memorial service?
No, I did not.
If I read this correctly, however, you were in the presence of the Menendez family on the 23rd, the 24th, the 25th, and the 26th. Is that right?
That's correct.
Why don't you open the appointment book, Dr. Oziel, for 1989 and turn to August 23rd. May I approach him?
Yes. Yes, both counsel.
August 29th
No, August 23rd.
or 23rd. Okay. Mm,
Okay, you see an entry in the appointment book for Menendez, 3 sessions for August 23rd.
that's correct.
Now that matches, does it not, the ledger entry of 3 sessions on August 23rd?
Yes, it does.
Now let's go to August 24th.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yes.
see an entry for Menendez that says 8 sessions,
Yes, I do.
and that matches the ledger card, correct?
Yes, it does.
Let's look at August 25th. Do you see an entry there for Menendez that also matches the ledger card?
Yes, I do.
And August 26th, do you see another entry that also matches the ledger cards?
Yes, I do.
So the appointment book and the ledger cards do seem to corroborate each other. Is that right?
In this regard, yes, they do.
In June of 1989, did you become acquainted with a woman named Judalon Smith?
Yes, I did.
And on October 31st, 1989, did you see Judalon Smith?
Yes, I did.
And as of October 31st, 1989, were you having a relationship with Judalon Smith which had a sexual component?
Yes, I was.
And at some point on October 31st, 1989, did you tell Judalon Smith what Erik and Lyle Menendez had said to you in their therapy session with you on that day?
No, I didn't tell her the totality of what they had said. I told her what I felt that I needed to disclose.
Did you tell her anything of what they said?
Yes, I did.
Did you tell them that you were going to tell Judalon Rose Smith, who you met in June of 1989, anything of what they were telling you?
No, I did not.
Now, did you make these revelations to Miss Smith in your office or somewhere else?
I believe I told Judalon Smith what I felt that I needed to tell her at her home.
Dr. Oziel,
was there some reason why you inserted in that answer what I needed to tell her when I asked you a location? Some reason you felt you needed to do that?
I was explaining what occurred.
I asked you where. Can you answer where?
Excuse me, this is already on there.
All right, he has answered the question.
Now, you believe it was at her home. Do you have some doubt in your mind about where it was?
To the best of my recollection, it was in her home.
Are you sure it was at her home?
I'm relatively certain it was at her home.
Are you absolutely positive it was at her home?
I believe I said I'm relatively certain it was
No,
at her home.
but then the answer is no, you're not absolutely positive.
I'm basically as positive as I can be that it was at her home.
So you are positive it was at her home.
That's an argument.
Sustained.
Now, you're aware of the fact that she claims that she was in your office while the Menendez brothers were seeing you on October 31st. Are you not?
Yeah, I'm aware.
It's not offer for the truth.
Still objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Did you ask Judalon Smith to come to your office on October 31st in order to eavesdrop on your therapy sessions with the Menendez brothers that day?
Actually, it was quite the contrary.
Well, can you answer that question, yes or no, Dr. Oziel?
I don't think I can.
You can't answer that. You did. Did you
Can you
ask
repeat
her
it?
to be there?
No, I didn't.
There you go.
Yes, if you could confine yourself to questions and listening to the witnesses' answers, Ms. Abramson.
So you didn't ask her to be there, correct?
That's correct.
And is it your testimony that she was not there?
I do not recall Judalon Smith being there, that I saw her. I was in session with Erik and Lyle for approximately 4 to 4.5 hours. And I would have no way of knowing whether anybody else came into my waiting room while I was in session with somebody. So the answer is, to the best of my knowledge, no, she was not there.
Well, if you have no way of knowing, then your answer, I take it, is you don't know.
I don't know, but I do not believe she was there.
Can people just walk into your office at any hour of the day or night? The door's unlocked. Is that right?
Absolutely. The door to the waiting room is unlocked. They can't walk into the inner corridor that leads to session rooms, but they can walk into the waiting room.
At all hours of the day or night?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I would say as long as there is any therapist remaining in the office seeing patients, the waiting room door is closed, but the door to the waiting room is, from the outside, is unlocked.
After you finished seeing Erik and Lyle on October 31st, did you see Judalon Smith in your office?
I don't recall having seen Judalon Smith in my office.
Well, do you think you would recall if she had been there?
I don't have any recollection of her being there.
Did you make some phone calls after you saw Erik and Lyle on October 31st?
Yes, I did.
Did you make those calls from your office?
Yes, I did.
Was Judalon Smith present when you made those phone calls?
I do not recall Judalon Smith being there then either.
Was she there?
I don't recall her being there.
So are you saying she wasn't there, or are you just saying you don't remember?
I don't believe she was there.
Well, you don't believe she was there?
I don't recall Judalon Smith as having been there, no.
Was it raining that night?
I have no idea whether it was raining or not.
Were you wearing clothes that night?
Yes, I was wearing clothes.
You're certain of that?
I am certain I was wearing clothes. That's correct, Ms. Abramson.
It's not that you believe you were wearing clothes. You know you were wearing clothes. Is that correct?
I do know I was wearing clothes. That's correct, Ms. Abramson.
Do you know if Judalon Smith was there or not?
Overruled.
I don't believe Judalon Smith was in my office. I don't recall having seen her.
Do you know if she was there?
I can't know if she walked into the waiting room, no.
Did she walk into your office, into your field of vision, when you were making the phone calls?
No.
Who did you call?
I called several attorneys.
Who?
I don't remember all the names of the attorneys that I called.
Who do you remember?
One of the people that I called was Mr. Brunon.
And you called him from your office phone?
Yes, I did.
And what was the number of that phone?
What was the number of Mr. Brunon's phone?
Yours.
My phone. 310-278-6342.
278-6342.
That's correct.
And did you reach Mr. Brunon?
I don't recall. I actually talked to a number of people over several days, and I don't know who I called or didn't call.
Let's back up. We're just on October 31st, right after Erik and Lyle have left, correct?
Correct.
You've made a series of calls, right?
Right.
Now, you said you called a number of attorneys. You've remembered for us one of them, your attorney, Mr. Brunon, who currently represents you, correct?
Correct.
Do you remember talking to Mr. Brunon from your office October 31st after Erik and Lyle left?
I don't recall which specific people I talked to that night. I was in a state of.
Excuse me, Your Honor, but could the witness be instructed to try to answer the question? Save
All right.
a lot of time.
All right, without comments by counsel, as I said, if you could answer yes or no, it would help us all.
Thank you.
Do
Ask
you
your question
remember?
again.
Yeah, sorry, Your Honor. Do you remember talking to Mr. Brunon that night?
No, I don't specifically.
Now, who else did you call that night? Not over several days, right there from your office. Who else did you call?
I believe I called another therapist.
All right, who was that?
That would be Dr. Lulo.
Dr. who?
Lulo,
How do you spell that?
Lulow.
And where is Dr. Lulo located?
He's located in Beverly Hills.
And is he still in Beverly Hills?
I believe he is.
And did you reach Dr. Lulo?
I recall having reached him.
So you talked to him.
Believe so.
Was there any other psychologist, therapist, person involved with the certifying or licensing of psychologists that you spoke to that night?
No, absolutely not. And
Did you speak to your own therapist that night?
no, I did not.
Did you speak to anyone that night with whom you had a privileged relationship where you were the holder of the privilege?
If I spoke with Mr. Brunon, which I'm not sure.
I don't mean
Yeah,
your
yeah.
lawyer, I mean in a psychotherapeutic sense, that privilege.
Not that I'm aware.
Are you aware of the fact that you attempted to assert such a privilege in testimony before Judge Albrecht in the summer of 1990 when we were questioning you about who you called?
Yes. All right, we're going to take a break at this point until tomorrow morning. And let me just say a few words to both juries. It's critical that you not be exposed to anything relating to this case. And I've gone through this many times with you. And I know that you're trying as hard as you can to follow my instructions, and I appreciate that. And it's sometimes difficult to do that in that without any intentions on your part, sometimes you can be exposed to something about this case, whether it's a conversation or a brief mention of something in the news coverage of a story that's coming up or a headline or something of that nature. And the important thing is that you not go beyond whatever might accidentally come into your consciousness, either by seeing or reading or hearing something inadvertently, and that you not go beyond that and do anything to actively acquire any information about this case. And if at any time something happens where you are exposed to anything about this case accidentally, I would appreciate it, and I would instruct you to let me know of it so that we can deal with that as well. But it's just to follow up on what I've said, don't go out and listen to any of the news coverage of the case. Don't go out and look at any of the television coverage of the case. Don't look at any of the papers or magazines or anything else that might have anything to do with this case. And don't be present when other people are talking about the case. If you can do anything to avoid it, it's very important that you do that. So we'll be in recess until tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, at which time we're going to resume with the testimony for both juries, and we'd ask that you all return at that time at 9 o'clock so that we can resume with the trial. And we'll be in recess then until tomorrow at 9 o'clock. We'd ask that all the people in the audience stay behind until we're ready to proceed. Mr. Sullivan, if you could stay behind for a moment. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I've got the wrong one. Yeah. Emerson, I'm sorry, Mr. Emerson, if you would stay behind. Yeah, I'm sorry. Everyone else is excused. Okay, Mr. Emerson, just to follow up on something that we learned of, you can fill me in on the details. Were you in a hallway outside during a lunch hour or just before we resumed at 1:30? And did you overhear something about this case?
I didn't overhear anything. I heard conversation, which was loud enough had I been listening.
Okay, but were you able to discern what was being said? Okay, so then what did you do, if anything, to?
I just asked if they'd hold it down, please. It's very hard not to get contaminated.
Okay, and then is it a fair statement that you did not hear anything about what they were saying?
I heard nothing of the content. I heard the name Erik, and he said, she said type thing.
Okay,
That's all, but no.
you heard the name Erik,
Yes.
and you said you heard she said, he said.
Words to that effect. Yes. I was about 15, 20 feet.
Okay, so if you heard someone say she said, did you hear what it was that she was supposed to have said?
No, I heard nothing about the content.
Okay, you heard someone say she said this and he said that, but you didn't hear what the this and that
That's what
were?
it sounded like to me.
Okay, and whatever occurred, you'll be able to set that aside and make your decision based only on what happens in the courtroom.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir. Certainly, yeah, yeah. Did you see the people who were speaking?
Yes.
Okay, do you see them in the courtroom?
Yes, the gentleman in the dark blue blazer, and there was a pretty young thing with a burgundy colored skirt on. I don't know whether she was audience or family or what.
Okay,
And a couple of young gentlemen.
okay, all right, okay, we'll deal with that, okay. And you didn't hear anything of the content?
I heard nothing.
Okay, all right, thank you, sir. All right. All right, let me say this to any people in the audience and those who are in earshot, that it's obviously very important that all participants in this trial and all spectators not say anything before the jurors that relate to this case. Otherwise, it could create potential problems for the continuation of the trial or the participation of individual jurors, so that anybody who wants to continue to have access to this courtroom will have to abide by the rules not to discuss this matter in any way, shape, or form in earshot of any jurors or potential earshot of any jurors. All right, we'll be in recess until tomorrow at 9 o'clock.